to the back of the market. I'm trying to go down the lift. Someone threw a brick at me. I've had blood pouring down my face. It was like something from a movie. I couldn't believe it. And then I managed to get outside. Some guy rammed me with a scooter. I went flying in the air. Bam! And it's on non-stop all day, every day. Half the room is in chains because that's the only way the police can stop you from killing each other. And if the hand chains don't work, they chain your hands to your legs. And you're just sitting there. But the Messiah was adamant that he could save everybody in the room, and that he was a billionaire, and it was wild. Like he would do this thing where he would like punch, and he would make the noise with his mouth, and he'd be like, "I'm breaking the sound barrier. I could teach you." And other people picked up pretty quickly that like if you fed into his madness, that he made the room a lot easier for you. And I popped the guy, and I just destroyed his nose, and he went down like a sack. And the people were screaming because there was so much blood. Just unluckily, there was so much blood on his face. And I was taken to solitary confinement on that night. I started to get green fingernails. I started to get really, really unhealthy from just the being in your own, soaking in your own sweat. There's zero ventilation. And of course, there's 3 CCTV cameras that work in the room, but there's no aircon. Chained by my leg to the floor with a big, like, I guess, like 14, 15-pound chain, like a marine links on it. And I was pretty much not allowed to do anything. And then I started to go to war with the police because I realized, I was like, okay, like there's nothing worse they can do to me, right? Like, so when they tell me to sit down, I'm like, I'm not going to sit down. And they're like beeping me on the intercom. You need to sit down. You need to sit down. You need to watch the news. And I'm like, there's no TV in here, man. Who is watching the news? You guys are crazy, not me. Like I had such bad piles in the detention center. I was covered in blood most days, and I didn't have another pair of underwear. So I'd be washing underwear. I had to sit down 14, 16 hours a day on cement, cold cement. And I didn't have any medicine for piles, right? So, and piles is excruciating, man. Like piles really just, it's maddening, you know?
Huge thank you to you, the viewers, for helping us get to over 1 million subscribers. If you've not subscribed yet, please hit the subscribe button. Helps us get great guests and keep doing this hard-hitting content.
Hello, everybody. I'm here with Matthew, and the BBC News reported his story. Quote, "You start to go crazy." The Australian who survived 5 years in a Chinese prison. I'll read you the beginning of the article from the 18th of May, 2025. Sharing a dirty cell with a dozen others. Constant sleep deprivation. Cells with lights on 24 hours a day. Poor hygiene and forced labor. These are some of what prisoners in Chinese jails are subjected to, according to Australian citizen Matthew, who spent 5 years at Beijing's No. 2 prison, a facility used for international inmates. And then they give a quote from Matthew. "I was in really bad shape when I arrived. They beat me for 2 days straight in the first police station that I was in. I hadn't slept or eaten or had water for 48 hours. And then I was forced to sign a big stack of documents." Well, he got arrested on the 2nd of January, 2020. So huge thank you for doing this, man. And can you just tell the viewers what led to you ending up in a Chinese prison?
Yeah, Shaun, thank you for having me on the podcast. It's been some time we've been trying to do this, so I'm pretty happy we got to do it eventually today. So my official charge was that I was charged with armed robbery and violently resisting arrest. Now, what actually happened was pretty simple. I went to get my phone repaired, as is the normal case in most Asian countries. If you have a Samsung phone and you go to Samsung, it's going to be so expensive rather than just going to like a local vendor who can do it for you. A cracked screen or changing a battery or anything that's fairly simple can just be done on the spot without wait times and stuff like that. So I had a local guy that I always use to repair any of my devices. And I went to see him. I just had the brand new iPhone 11, which I'd only purchased in October of that year. So it was quite new. and I cracked the screen, as I often do, which is just fairly routine for me. I'm like, okay, I've got a broken screen. I know it's the iPhone 11, and I know you guys use like a lot of aftermarket products to fix your phones and whatnot. Can you get it done? Because if I go to Apple, they're going to charge me 3,500 renminbi. And the guy was like, yeah, I can do it. Don't worry about it. Give me 1 day. I got to get the screen from another friend of mine. He's a screen guy. He'll give me the screen. 1,500 renminbi, and we'll call it even. I was like, perfect. And then that was like the 28th of December. So I hadn't heard from this guy, and I needed my phone. At that stage, I was selling, I had an e-commerce store. So my phone was literally my life, not just for streaming content, but for making sales and like putting food on the table. So I'm calling this guy nonstop for a good 3 days before I finally get a call from him on the 2nd of January. And at that stage, I was furious, man. I missed out on New Year's Eve with my phone. I had a DJ that I sponsored that was DJing at a place in Hebei called Space. And I had wanted to go there and film and just like upload content because he was wearing my label. And then when I finally get to the store on the 3rd of January, Way's there. And I'm like, hey, man, like, you know, I've been waiting 5 days for my phone now, but like whatever it is, I get it. You know, you got kids or whatever. You're a busy man. I understand. Let's just show it to me and I'll give you the money and get out of here because I need to be somewhere else. And at that point, he came to me with some long-winded story about his brother who was standing there, really likes the phone because it's the yellow one, and he tried to get the yellow one from the iStore, and blah, 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 blah. And then so, but what happened was the screen was so expensive because it's a new one, and then so the screen's going to be 3,500, not 1,500. But don't worry, because my friend wants to buy your phone, so my friend will buy your phone for 4,500, and I'll just give you one. That I was like, dude, I'm not trying to hear any of this. Like, please, just give me my phone. I took out 1,500 renminbi. I threw it on the counter. I grabbed my phone. I was like, dude, I'm out of here. I got better things to do. I got halfway to the door. I didn't think anything of it. I never could have imagined in that moment. I mean, you live in Asia for a long time. You live in China for a long time. Like, you've been finessed by cab drivers. You've been finessed by just about everybody that can finesse you. So I was like, oh, well, you know, he tried to pull a fast one. I never even thought. I was already 3 steps forward on what I had to do for the rest of my day when I just got grabbed on the shoulder, and I turned around and all I saw was like a can of pepper spray. And I managed to just swat it out of this guy's hand without even realizing it was a security guard. And he had another security guard that was there with a taser that tried to electrocute me. So I managed to defend myself against those 2 guys. I managed to wrestle the pepper spray off one of them, sprayed the other guy, and was thinking to myself, like, at some point, like, I got to get out of here because this is not, I'm in the middle of the phone market in the middle of Beijing, and I'm a foreigner, and I've just pepper sprayed 2 security guards, and I got to get the hell out of here. And by the time I got to the front door, there was just people everywhere. They were screaming, "Changjie, Changjie," which is robbery. But you know, the Chinese language is very tonal. So Changjian means, and Changjie means robbery. So people are screaming, "Changjie, Changjie," and like, just like, it was like a hornet's nest, man. People were coming from everywhere. I pepper sprayed a bunch of people at the front. I ran to the back of the market. I tried to go down the lift. Someone threw a brick at me. I've had blood pouring down my face. It was like something from a movie. I couldn't believe it. And then I managed to get outside. Some guy rammed me with a scooter. I went flying in the air. I got back up, kept running. People are chasing me. Foreigner, foreigner. At this stage, I'm just like, I can't believe what the is happening to me. I run, and then I ended up just getting engulfed by a mob, you know? So people were sitting on me. I distinctly remember one old lady, like, she spat on me, and I was on the floor, and it had just gone. It was about 6 p.m. So it just started to get dark. People were filming, so I could see all the flashes of people filming me, and I'm laying on the ground, and 2 big Chinese guys sitting on top of me. And every time I breathe in, I breathe out a little bit less. And I was like, I'm getting crushed to death. Like, so I start screaming. I'm like, "Wabunang hushi, wabunang hushi," like, I can't breathe. And they were screaming back, like, "No one cares if you can breathe. You're a robber. You're a robber. You robbed the phone." So then the police came, and I was so happy because the police got there so quickly, right? It's like central Beijing, Sanlitun, Beijing. So I was like, okay, cool. The police are here. You know, my Chinese is okay. I'll be able to explain to them, look, I bought the phone, and then, you know, everything will be okay. And then from the minute the police got there, everybody scattered, right? And I was in bad shape. I'd already had like my North Face jacket was all torn. I had blood all down my face, and it made it worse. I was wearing a white hoodie, right? So I had blood all over my white hoodie, and the officers were like, "What the?" They were asking people in Chinese, like, "What happened?" Like, and they were like, "Oh, nothing, nothing." So then they put me in the cop car, and I'm thinking to myself, "Okay, they're going to take me to a police station. I'm going to call some people that I know in China. I'm going to get this all settled out. I'm going to call some guys that I have guanxi with, like I have relationships with." And everything will be revealed and everybody will be fine. So I get to the police station and the police are pushing this narrative that like, you know how many people you hurt? Do you understand what you've done? This is not Australia, this is China. You can't just go around robbing people for mobile phones. And people started to like flow into the police station, all like holding their faces, like, oh, I got pepper sprayed by the foreigner. I got pepper sprayed by the foreigner. And at that time, I called my housemate and I was like, I don't know where you are, but like, I'm living in a movie right now. I need you to get to the Medzadian police station in Sanlitun and help me to translate because this has gone way past my level of Chinese, right? So she arrives and basically the officers broke it down. They were like, you need to pay 30,000 renminbi, which at that stage was about 4,000 US dollars to the phone vendor. And then you need to pay about 30,000 to, and they calculate, it was like, you need to pay like they said Sambai Wusha Won, which is like 3.5 million renminbi. And I was like, I mean, even on a good day on the markets, I don't really have 500,000 US dollars laying around the house, nonetheless in cash where I can just settle this right now, right? So I was like, look, I'll make some phone calls. And they wouldn't give me my phone. They wouldn't allow me to have my phone. And they brought out one Chinese police officer and she was like, you're in such big trouble right now. You don't understand because you're Australian. This is China. We have, robberies about the worst crime you can do in China, blah, blah, blah. But you just have to wait here. And at that point, my ex-housemate, she just left me there. She was like, there's nothing I can do. You're going to have to wait here and go through the whole course. So I told her like, okay, but I'll be in contact with you because I know some people that will be able to get to a decent lawyer. So just stay by your phone. And she was like, no problem. And then I finally was taken to this little room at the back of the police station. And then they were asking me a bunch of questions and they brought some, and this was pretty scary. They brought some major crimes guys that came and they were in like plain clothes with like lanyards, right? They looked like narcos or like the Beijing version of narco cops. And they were like, yeah, this is a big problem, like explaining to me through the translator that this is like, you're in so much trouble. But first, we need to show you something. So they're flipping through this book and they're showing me a bunch of photos of like a guy in a hoodie and like a black North Face jacket, like my North Face jacket. They're saying, do you know this apartment building? I'm like, they all look the same to me. I don't know what you're talking about. Can we start to talk about like me getting out of these handcuffs and like, I want to speak to my lawyer. And they're like, no. So they flick through a bunch of like pictures. Keep said, you know this apartment? Have you ever been to this apartment? I'm like, bro, I don't know what you guys are talking about. Like, I just want to call a lawyer. I just want to explain that it's my phone. And these two major crimes cops were like, don't worry about the phone. Like, we don't need to worry about the phone. And then they basically took a picture of some guy who looked like a Uyghur, the people from Xinjiang. And they were like, Bushita, like, that's not him. So at that point, they left and they said to the lady, like whatever, like, we don't care. Like, he's on his own. Like, and I later found out that those major crimes guys were looking for somebody that had pepper sprayed someone and the person had died. So word had got to them. We've got the pepper spray guy. He's a foreigner. And they came down and they were like, we got the pepper spray murderer. And then when they realized, they're like, no, this has nothing to do with major crimes. They just left me there. And at that point, the police took my phones, everything, bundled everything up. And then I just, bam, the back of my head straight. And I was like, what the, bam, again. I got beaten so badly for that first 4 hours that my head was so swollen I couldn't think of anything. I got taken into a little room and they gave me like a drug, like a cup for peeing for a drug test that had already been open and it already showed like methamphetamine, ecstasy. Like all of the squares had purple lines in them and they were like, you pee in this, you pee in this. And I was like, I want to speak to my embassy. I want to speak to a lawyer. I got blood all over my face. And At no point did anybody ever ask me, so what happened today at the phone store? What happened? You just woke up and decided to go rob a phone store? Nobody asked me anything. It was already concluded that this guy's a robber. He used pepper spray. He used a taser, and he came to this like wholesome vendor and tried to kill him for an iPhone 11. And they left me there, and they beat my ass for a solid 2 days before I got transferred. And I was so happy to be leaving that police station. I was like, yes, the next place I go, I'm going to get to tell my story. Someone's going to listen to me finally, right? I get to the next place, and they've literally stripped me. They've strip searched me. And then they've given me the threadless bare, like gray pajamas you've ever seen in your life. And it was so cold. January in Beijing, it's like -12, -13 degrees. So I'm wearing these pajamas, and they've taken me downstairs on this metal staircase. I can hardly walk. I'm like trying to lean on the police officer. And he's like,
Matthew, I've got a question.
Yeah.
If you're getting beaten for 2 days,
Yeah.
how do you get through that psychologically?
I mean, I just kept thinking to myself that like somebody is gonna come and ask me that like what's happened, and so I just kept thinking to myself, the thing that was maybe I'm stubborn, more stubborn than the regular person. I just kept pushing myself that like, don't worry, like all will be revealed, right? The worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to get a 2-day beating, and then maybe you can file a lawsuit against the police. Or I was using a very Western.
What about dealing with the pain? Do you just get numb after so many hours?
Yeah, I think after 2 or 3 good shots in the head, you get numb, and by the time I got to the detention center, which is about 5 days after, had broken ribs. I've still got scar on my eyebrow. I was in pretty bad shape, man. And I couldn't really move for about 3 weeks.
Broken ribs is rough. I've had bruised and cracked ribs.
Yeah.
And if you sneeze, you feel like you're getting shot, and it's like hard to sleep. You can't even like move properly.
Yeah. But there was so much adrenaline for like, I would say the first, even day. I was just so angry. I was screaming like, I need to speak to somebody. I was going in waves of like anger, and then just like exhaustion and anger, but just thinking to myself like I'm innocent. I think it's harder to accept something when you haven't done anything. If you know that you're guilty and then you get caught and someone beats the shit out of you, you're like, all right, this is what I deserve. So you take it. But when you've got this fire inside you that says like, I haven't done anything wrong, I just need my chance to say something.
So when you was limping into the new place, was the pain affecting you then?
Yeah, obviously, and it was so cold. I'll never forget throughout 2020 is the first time in my life where I've experienced cold as dangerous to your health. Like a cold. Normally you go, oh, Beijing's so cold, and I've lived in Seoul and I've lived in New York and a bunch of places that are like -20, -18, but you're not walking out there in your boxer shorts in the middle of November in Seoul, right? So the second place they took me down this staircase, and then there was just a row of like a corridor with a bunch of rooms, and there was a scoreboard at the end of on the wall. There was a scoreboard, and it had like names in Chinese and numbers. And I was looking in the rooms, and there was people that were sitting in what's later being called the tiger chair, that a lot of the people from Xinjiang have talked about. They get strapped in that chair when they're interrogated. And there was people in the tiger chair. And I was thinking to myself, holy shit, like these guys are going to kill me. I thought it was an electric chair because I was so badly concussed, and I hadn't slept. I hadn't eaten. I was in such a bad state. I was hysterical. I was like, these guys are literally going to just, because throughout the whole process of them beating me, they were like, nobody cares. Like, your embassy doesn't care. You're Australian or not, doesn't matter. Like, we are the police. This is China. Like, oh, well, cry for your embassy. No one cares. You don't, like, we will tell you when you can speak to your embassy. We will tell you when you can speak to your family, So I had this thing flashing through my mind of like, I want to go back to the other police station where they were beating me instead of here where they're going to like electrocute me. And from there, they brought out this quite handsome, like dashing, like immigration officer that I remember. He just looked like he looked like a Korean movie star. And he was like, so you're in big trouble. And then he like relayed it to me, and he was like, you're being charged with robbery and violently resisting arrest and a bunch of disturbing the peace or whatever. And you're but don't worry, we're going to take you for a medical, and then we're going to deport you back to Australia. And I was like, score, like, that's much better than what the other lady was explaining at the other police station, that like I would have to pay 3.5 million renminbi and that I'm going to go to prison for 10 years. But I found out that was a complete lie. They put me in a car and drove me to the south of Beijing, which is Daxing. And I was thinking that's where the airport is, the new airport. So I'll get to go through the new airport and I'll go home.
If you're enjoying the podcast, please support our sponsor, NordVPN. As many of you know, years ago, I clicked on a link in an email. It was a phishing scam and I lost my channel. And it took weeks to get it back. But you can be fully protected from phishing by NordVPN. In fact, loads of people are asking where can they watch my Sons of Ecstasy documentary. It's not available in the UK. Let's see, United States. There we go. Connecting to the United States. So Nord is the fastest VPN on the planet. So the scammers have got good at creating fake shops online. They take your money, they are gone. But with Nord's Threat Protection Pro, you are protected. Threat Protection Pro is blocking hundreds of millions of scam hits per year. Sometimes pop-up ads containing malware are a nightmare. You're trying to close them, then boop, you go right through. Threat Protection Pro removes these dangerous files from your device. You hear about all of these huge companies getting hacked. Well, if your data is on the dark web, NordVPN's Dark Web Monitor alerts you. You can get an exclusive NordVPN deal plus 4 months extra. Link in description box on YouTube. It's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. Link on the screen, nordvpn.com/Attwood, A-T-T-Wood. Link in description box if you watch on YouTube. Thanks for supporting our sponsor. Back to the podcast.
And I was taken to a police station outside, and it's, I was watching this fence kept flying past the side of the car, and you've anywhere in the world you see a prison, you see that long fence and that manicured green grass and the barbed wire, and I was like, hold on a minute, like this doesn't look like I'm going to the airport. This looks like I'm going to prison. And they took me to a police station, and they left me in the car for 7 hours, 7 good hours. I was just sitting in the car asking them like, what's going on? And they're like, shut up, like Bizway. Like, no one cares what you have to say. They took me into the police station. I signed a bunch of documents, which I later understand. I was basically signing away my right to bail and to, I was basically signing documents that say that, like, I have no job. I have no anything to tie me to China. So therefore, I need to be detained throughout the entire process of my incarceration, rather than, oh, I've got a rental lease. I own a company. I've got a registered, what they call WAFI, like a wholly owned foreign enterprise in China. So at that stage, like I've already signed away all my rights, and they're saying, just sign. It's nothing. It's for your medical. So I'm just signing, right? At that stage, I was just so happy to be out of the car and like for the beatings to stop. And I was back in the clothes that I was wearing when I got arrested. So I was like, okay, I'm quite warm. I'm quite happy, content now after the last 3 days of what I've been through. And then they were like, go over there for your medical. And that's when like these PLA soldiers came up and they grabbed me like by the scruff of my neck. And I'll never forget the floodlights shining in my eyes, right? And I'm like, I'm going to prison, man. I can't believe this. And then I was in the detention center.
So arriving there, how did that feel?
It's probably the scariest moment of your life. But it's funny, right? I look back now, I was so oblivious to what was coming. I was so like out of my depth. I kept thinking like, someone's going to come. I'm going to explain my story. I'm going to use my phone. I'm going to call the guys I worked with at the Four Seasons. I'm going to call my housemate. All will be revealed, blah, blah, blah. So I wasn't really soaking it in. And then I remember I did the induction. They took me in. They took all my clothes off me. They gave me the orange jumpsuit it's orange. It's two-tone orange and gunmetal gray. I didn't have any shoes, didn't have any shirt. I only had one pair of underwear. They put a jacket, like a snowboarding jacket, and a pair of pants on me. And then they asked me a bunch of questions. Do you take medication? Do you have food allergies? Blah, blah, blah. Signed a bunch of paperwork, took a bunch of blood, and then put me in the room with this massive Nigerian guy who I later became friends with. His name is Renminbi. And Renminbi looked at me and he's like, we're in serious trouble now, man. He's like, I don't know where we are, but like we're in it right now. This is real. And I'll never forget just being so cold, Sean. I didn't have shoes, I didn't have socks, and these cement tiles, and it was bad. And then I eventually got just thrown into a cell, and I'll never forget walking through the corridor because it was about 3 a.m. And in the detention center, you have two people on night duty, basically standing up for 2-hour rotations, and everybody else sleeps on the board with these dingy blankets. And it's a cement room, and it's so dingy. It's like the room hasn't been renovated since the 1950s, right? The radiator, everything is so old. There's rising damp. It's like a dungeon. There's only other way to describe it as a dungeon. And I see all these people laying on this cement, and the people standing up, and I thought it was dead bodies. Like it really looked like a morgue, and it was so cold. And the doors were like freezer, like refrigerator doors when you have like a walk-in closet in a restaurant, a walk-in fridge. So I was thinking to myself, like, maybe this is a hospital. Maybe I'm being led through the morgue into the hospital, and they're going to do a medical, and they're going to deport me. And I still just had no idea that I would end up spending 504 days in that same room.
So there's various stages of adaptation. For me, I was in shock.
Yeah.
And then I start to understand the schedule, start to talk to people, figure out who's who, and you get a routine and you adapt. Could you describe your various stages of adaptation?
So I'd been so badly beaten, they threw me in that room, and then they just gave me a blanket, and I just lay down and just like collapsed. And it wasn't until the next morning when the loudspeaker in the room, the PA just something in Chinese that I at the time was inaudible, but by the time you left, it was like that thing spoke to your soul. Like it became that PA could really it drove me crazy in many ways, the PA system throughout my whole incarceration. But then some guy just gets in my face, an American guy, I don't want to name his name, but he was there he basically had roughed up a prostitute, and then they had claimed that it was rape. And so he got in my face and was like, dude, there's a routine. You got to hustle. You got to make your blanket. You got to do this. You got to do that. And I was like, man, leave me alone. Like, I'm so badly beaten. I could hardly talk. And I remember for the first 3 weeks that I was with that guy, my vocabulary was like 5 words, 10 words. I just couldn't articulate anything to him about my case or about anything. And I realize now I must have been having some severe brain trauma or swelling on the brain, because for that period, I just couldn't articulate anything across to him about my circumstances. And he had proceeded to basically nurse me, do all my chores for me, and tell me that he'd been there for 9 months. And I was like, what? Well, I was like, you've been in this room, this 2.6 meters by 5 meters with all of these guys. You've been here for 2 months. He's like, 9 months. I'm like, you've been here for 9 months. I couldn't understand. And he's like, that guy's been here for 4 years. I'm like, that guy's been here since 2017 in this room? For what? Like, where am I? Is this like, I just couldn't understand. And slowly after they started explaining to me, this is a detention center, this is arbitrary detention, you're going to be held here. Unlike in the West, right, where they arrest you after they've built the case and then they take you to trial. But in China, they arrest you, they put you in the detention center, and then they build their case. So it was explained to me that the embassy would come visit me. And the embassy came, and this was the start of what I can only explain as like the most criminally negligent embassy staff that, even compared to other G20 nations, like the Australian embassy is the worst embassy that you could ever wish for. And it started with one guy came in, and I'll never forget, his name was Stuart. And he's like, yeah, so you're in big trouble, and like you're being charged with robbery, but don't worry, like, we come here, we'll help you to contact your family, but I won't help you because I'm going home in 2 days because and he kept talking about how lucky he was to be going home. And then he gave me to the Chinese fixer, and they literally gave me an A4 piece of paper, and they said, this is the lawyer list, and you're going to use this to decide which lawyer you want, and then you'll contact us, and then we'll contact your family. And at that stage, I was just like, I was trying to get my information to them, contact my housemate, contact this person. This is the 7th of January. They give me the piece of paper. 30 minutes is up. They said we'll be back next month. They dip. And the officer takes the piece of paper and throws in the bin. And I was just like, this embassy staff, they've been dealing with Australians that have been incarcerated in China since 2000, like the early 2000s. They know very well the conditions of the prison. They know very well the conditions of the detention center. They know that they cannot give you that piece of paper and you can take it to the room. But I realized early on, it's like the embassy's not there to help you. The embassy's just there to tick a box. Like, did we give him that piece of paper? So I go back to the room and I'm furious, right? And I'm speaking to David, one of the guys in the room, and he's like, "Yeah, my embassy's great. Like they visit me every month. They bring me money. Like yeah, it's amazing. They've done so much for me." And I was like, "What? Like they bring you money?" Because the embassy asked me, "Do you have money?" I was like, "No, but don't worry about it. What do I need money for?" I didn't realize you need money for everything, right? And then I went back to the room and it was just like, okay, I got to get my shit together here. Like, this is getting serious. I can't spend months in this room. Like, I've got a business to run. I've got family. I've got people that are relying on me to pay their salaries. So I got to get my act together. And I started like borrowing paper from somebody and writing down like key points, what I need to do. So for my next embassy visit, and that was the 7th of January. And then like they opened the door on the 14th of January and they're like, there's a virus outside killing lots of people. So yeah, there's no shopping anymore. There's no embassy visits. There's no court. There's no anything. Just wait. You guys are here. Just be patient.
All right, before we get to that section, Matthew, let me ask you a quick question then.
Yeah.
So when you're recovering from your injuries and you were very fragile,
Yeah.
how did that affect you eating, using the toilet, and sleeping?
So for the first 3 weeks, I didn't have to do anything in the room. I didn't have to sit when everyone else was sitting. I didn't have to sleep when everyone else was sleeping. I didn't have to clean the toilet. I didn't have to do anything. I was literally just allowed to just lay on the blanket because I was so badly, and I've still got one scar on my hand. My hand was like a big open wound. So the American guy.
But like you say, you laid on the blanket. What's the sleeping conditions?
So you're in, like I said, you're in a 2.6 meter by 5 meter room, very high ceilings, and in the middle of the room, say 80 centimeters is like a walkway, and then the rest of the room is like, it's maybe like a 3 feet high concrete, like a hearth, right? Where like in those old houses where they put like firewood under the concrete and they sleep on top. So it's like that. That's the majority of the room. And then you've got like an all glass toilet, and it was a squat toilet. I'd never used a squat toilet before. And that's just all open. There's 2 CCTV cameras, one at each end, one in the toilet, and then there's these neon lights that are on, and then just a door, and there's no windows, there's no anything.
So there's no privacy. There's no privacy for the toilet.
Yeah, I'll tell you a funny story about that later. But so then I'm laying on the board, on what they call the board, right? They call it the board, right? So and throughout your whole experience in Chinese detention center, like zoba means like sit on the board. And then so they just keep talking about the board, right? So guys sit on the board all day. They basically roll up their blanket, they put it under themselves, and they sit on the board and just stare at the wall and wait for the court to come. So I was just sitting in the corner, and the American guy was feeding me. He was helping me with food. I would need 2 people to carry me to the toilet. I had this huge open wound on my hand. I was asking them for medical, and they just kept telling me like, Dangisha, like just wait, like the medical is coming, and just it never came. And then after 3 weeks, and this is a common thread in Chinese prison that I really have not been able to talk about with legacy media, is that the Chinese prison system is delegated from the Chinese police because the Chinese are super lazy, and they have just delegated all of their duties to Chinese with foreign passports. So every room has like a dedicated like number 1 in the room, and it's always a Chinese guy with a Canadian passport, British passport, Australian passport, and they're always worse than the police. They're always working in cahoots with the police, and they're always like, they'll have a dispute with one of the Nigerian guys, and then they'll scream on the microphone like, "Oh no, he's trying to kill me, and the police will come and they'll put the Nigerian guy in chains, and he'll just sit there for 2 weeks. And throughout my entire prison experience, Chinese nationals, Chinese-born foreign nationals, are complicit in so many atrocities inside the Chinese prison system, and they just make everything worse for everybody. And that's something that I want to delve into a little bit later, is just the way that these Chinese with foreign passports, they make out like, "Oh, I'm so hardly done by," to the embassy. And then they'll, like, once I've met with my embassy, they'll translate everything I said to the Australian embassy back to the police in the detention center. And then they'll talk to the embassy and say, oh, I'm being so hardly done by. And then they'll go to the room and they'll talk to the police and say, yeah, Australian embassy, so stupid. Can't believe these people, idiots, blah, 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 blah. So that guy for that.
I'm sorry, what about the eating as well?
Yeah, so that guy from the room, the number one for that room, he came to me and he was like, 3 weeks already, you're doing nothing in this room. You have to pull your weight, you know? So you got the chores, you got to clean the toilet, you got to do this, you got to do that. And I was like, who are you, man? Like, who are you? Like, who died and made you king? And he's like, you need to understand the rules of this place. I was like, the rules of what, dude? I was like, I'll murk you, bro. You're nothing. He's like 5'2". I was like, I will rip your head off. I won't even, like, I will just murder you right now. And they called the police. The police took me outside and basically gave me the rundown. They were like, look, if you have a problem with Chinese people in Chinese prison, it's going to be very hard for you. It's going to be very hard for you. The number one is there because he's the number one. If you have a problem with him, it's like having a problem with us. So better you just shut up and wait till you go to court and don't give us any troubles. Otherwise, we're going to come down on you like you wouldn't believe. And yeah, I mean, as far as the food was unedible. I mean, it was cabbage that was if you go to a market and see like the worst grade of everything, like the worst grade of potatoes, the worst grade of cabbage, the worst grade of anything you can recognize, they would just boil it to no end. And then you would just get that in a tiny tray, like a plastic tray, and like a plastic lunchbox, right? And they would just give you that. And then they would just give you like a manto, which is like a steamed bun. And you just had to eat it. And if you didn't eat it for 2 or 3 days, then that was your fault. And then you had to eventually force yourself to eat it. And one of the hardest things was that we didn't have shopping because of coronavirus, right? So like you couldn't buy soap, you couldn't buy toilet paper, you couldn't buy toothpaste, you couldn't buy anything and nothing is provided. It's not like other prisons where you ask the police, hey, we need bleach to clean the room. It's like you're responsible for everything yourself. And if you don't have money, then you don't shower with soap. And I didn't have money for 10 months. So throughout that whole process, I'm dealing with the fact that I'm like, still never got my opportunity to tell anybody what's happened. You know, I'm still waiting for my audience with somebody that has the common sense to understand I didn't rob anybody. And but before I even got to that stage, the prosecutors, they sent the investigators, and then that was when they came to me and gave me the rundown. They were like, you're after 37 days, I was arrested and I was formally charged with robbery, violently resisting arrest, and disturbing the public security. And I was told that you need to confess to the material facts of the case as per the Chaoyang prosecutor's office, which is the district for Beijing where I was arrested. And like torture is a big word. A lot of people throw around like, I was tortured. I felt so tortured. Like everybody in that detention center is tortured because you get the standard torture for everybody is malnutrition, sleep deprivation, and isolation. Can't speak to your people, can't call your embassy, can't speak to your lawyer. Food is inedible. So you've got malnutrition and you sleep deprivation. You can't sleep. How can you sleep with 35 people in a 2 meter by 5 meter room with the lights on? It's impossible. But on top of that, if you don't cooperate and sign the material facts as per the prosecutor's office, then you're open to starving, being frozen, being electrocuted, being chained to the wall for 7 days at a time, being left in a room with the static on the speaker, and not being able to sleep for 8, 9, 10 days. Nothing is off limits as far as the police have to get you to sign that confession. And I later understood about Chinese prison is they're not going to be like, oh, okay, so prove these are not your drugs. Well, there's no DNA on the drugs, so therefore it can't be his. It's like, no, but he confessed. His confession, it's typed up. It says here he confessed. And you're like, but why would you confess to something you wouldn't do, right? And that's what my thinking was like, all these guys, this guy obviously raped that prostitute. Why would you cop to raping a prostitute if you didn't do it? but that's because they torture you to the point that you have to confess. And the system is structured so that after 8 months of torturing me, they came to me and said, look, Matthew, if you sign this document, which is a leniency agreement, we'll give you 4 years. You'll only serve 4 years. All the time that you've already served in the detention center, which is 8 months, that's included in that 4 years. Sign this document. Your life will be so much easier. And at that stage, man, I was like, I've actually seen these people can't keep you here for 6 years. I've seen these people cannot allow you to call your family for 5 years. I've seen these people torture somebody so that the guy's his brain is so scattered that even if he walks out of here tomorrow, his life is already destroyed. And I was very wary. I was like, I got to sign that piece of paper. So when I got into the process of signing the piece of paper, they said, if you don't sign this piece of paper, you will start your sentence at 6 to 10 years. And you'll probably get like the high end of that. You probably get 10 years, 12 years even, because you haven't coordinated and you've taken 8 months to sign the simple confession. But if you sign that confession and you admit, yes, I went to the phone store to rob Mr. Wei, I bought the pepper spray online, it's all me, then 4 years. And, you know, they're like, you've already served 8 months. At that point, I was like, I had no toothbrush. I hadn't spoken to my family for 300 days. I had no idea what was happening with my company, my apartment, nothing. I'd just been trapped in that room, no embassy visits, no anything. And I was so desperate. I was like, 4 years is better than 10 years, you know? So I signed, and then things started to get a little bit easier.
What about toilet paper? Did they withhold that from you as well?
Yeah, I didn't have toilet paper. I had to work for a Chinese guy that was caught smuggling ivory for him to give me toilet paper. And he had some connection with the police where his brother was still topping up his card even during coronavirus. And then the police were taking money from him and giving him the most basic necessities. So he would give me like this, it's goldfish. It's like liquid detergent that you clean your dishes with. He would give me one of those and I was using it to shower. Right? He couldn't get a toothbrush. He couldn't get toothpaste. And so I had to learn from some of the Muslim guys in the detention center how to use water and a squat toilet and how to just get on with it. And in all honesty, like that was probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, Shaun. You know, when you grow up in the West, like using toilet paper or like these things are just very fundamental. Like this goes back to when you're a toddler, like your mother trained you how to use the toilet with toilet paper. And to get to 34 years old and like some of those things were harder than the fact that you haven't spoken to your family for a year. It's like I've got no dignity in here. There's a poverty of dignity in the Chinese detention system that if you have money, you can escape, but without money, you suffer a poverty of dignity and you become somebody that you don't even recognize yourself. You know?
Was there a Chinese guy who thought he was Jesus?
It's so funny. One of the chapters in my book is the Messiah complex. And I don't know if I can name him because I don't want to go to court, but he doesn't have enough money to take me to court anyway.
Just call him Jesus. Call him Jesus if you want.
Well, I mean, I'm a Christian. I'm a Baptist, so it's quite offensive, you know, to call this moron Jesus. But he had convinced himself. Yeah, JC. He had convinced himself that he was a billionaire and that he owned an airline in Thailand. And that he was married to like Thaksin Shinawat's daughter, and he had a golf course in Hua Hin, and amongst other things, he could cure anybody's ailments. And he came up to me one day, and he pulled a hair out of his head. He literally pulled a hair out of his head, and he goes, "You see this?" And he was dead serious. I was like, "Yeah, I see it." And he goes, "You see how it's gray at the bottom and black at the top?" I was like, I mean, you're holding it the wrong way, but he's dead serious. He's like, no, I'm like reversing the aging process with my massage and with my methods. And he's like, I can help you, Matthew. I can help you. You got a lot of problems, but I can help you. I was like, this guy's crazy. And the other people in the room, nobody said anything. They were like, so one of the things in the detention center, right? You fight with everybody. You fight for the simplest things. You fight for food. You fight for space. You fight for privacy. You fight for cold water. You fight for hot water. You fight for any water. You fight for everything in that detention center. And you're fighting Mongolians, Nigerians, a lot of like petty criminals, a lot of Chinese, a lot of like pickpockets, like, and you just fight.
Matthew,
Yeah.
what do you mean by fight? Do you mean like compete or fist fight?
I mean, you punch on all day, every day. It's like being in a gladiator's arena, and it starts from the minute 5 a.m. when they wake you up. Someone's like, "Stop looking at my pillow." I'm not looking at your pillow. Like, you're looking at my pillow. Like, fuck your pillow. And then the guy's like, "My pillow." Bam, and it's on nonstop all day, every day. Half the room is in chains because that's the only way the police can stop you from killing each other. And if the hand chains don't work, they chain your hands to your legs. And you're just sitting there. But the Messiah was adamant that he could save everybody in the room, and that he was a billionaire, and it was wild. Like he would do this thing where he would like punch, and he would make the noise with his mouth, and he'd be like, "I'm breaking the sound barrier. I could teach you." And other people picked up pretty quickly that like if you fed into his madness, that he made the room a lot easier for you. So other people were like, "Oh, sure, can you teach me?" And he's like this. And oh man, he massaged one American guy. The American guy had back problems. He was massaging the guy with a snapped off hairbrush handle, and was like, the guy was purple all over, his body was purple from this guy. And he was doing it so he could get an extra helping of rice, because once a month they gave rice. So the Messiah would give him an extra serving of rice. And I was looking at the guy, I was like, man, you're gambling with your entire life, because you're allowing the Messiah to use a hairbrush on you. I'm like, because you're letting him believe that he's really got some gift that he can cure people with a hairbrush. It was wild. And the scariest thing is, like, that he's a British citizen, and actually later on he went to prison, and he had a lot of sway in the prison. He relayed a lot of information to the police, and if he liked you, you got away with a lot of things, and if he didn't like you, your life was hell. The Scotsman that I was in prison with, that actually like gave me the idea of talking to you, he's also British, right? So he's also using the same embassy, and the embassy was catering to the Messiah like a concierge service. And then the Scotsman could never get a hold of the embassy. They were even telling the Messiah, tell him to stop calling us so much, because we'll see him in 2 months at the next visit. But the Messiah was calling the embassy like every day to ask them to do this, do that, do this. So as crazy as it was, for the most of the time that you're in the detention center, your life is in the hands of these maniacs.
What were the Mongolians like?
Mongolians are some of the wildest people you'll ever meet in your life. And for whatever reason, they love me, though, because I'm a fighter as well, right? So I was like, I'm not afraid to throw down. Some Chinese guys abusing me, bam, headbutt straight. I'm not here to waste time and make friends. So I moved a lot of rooms as well. I moved rooms about 13 times in the 500 days that I was in the detention center. And every room had 3 or 4 Mongolians in it, and they were all super scary. But for whatever reason, they embraced me, and they were like, we like you because you don't take shit from anybody. And, having them as friends was definitely to your advantage, because they were making, it's so wild. They were making like sewing needles out of spoons, plastic spoons. And they would take like thread from clothes, and they would cut the handle, and then they would like whittle it down and make it into a sewing needle. And then they were like sewing clothes for people and doing like, and they could do anything, these guys. So having them in your corner was really helpful. But they used to fight a lot, and they would fight with each other. They would fight with Nigerians. They would fight with the Chinese. They were wild, but it kept me on my toes. And also because most of them had been in prison their entire life, they were like, don't worry, 4 years? What is 4 years? I just finished 12 years. I'm going to go back for another 10 years. 4 years is nothing. So it kind of kept me in good spirits, right?
What was the worst violence that you saw, and did they make weapons?
No, it wasn't like, there was no shivs and stuff like that. I saw one guy get beaten really badly. One North Korean guy got his head smashed through the glass in the detention center because he was complaining that one of the Mongolian guys was like passing gas too much, which is just like when you're eating cabbage and steamed buns all day and you're living in such close confines, like everybody's just dropping bombs all day. And then these guys started off on each other, and the Mongolian guy just smashed his head into the door, and it broke, and then he had like all sorts of cuts, and that was pretty hardcore. But other than that, most of the violence was from the police, man. Most of the violence was chaining an African guy that had had an argument with a Chinese guy, chaining them like a dog, and then taking them outside, electrocuting them, and you can hear all the screams, and then bringing them back on their all fours and getting them to apologize to each and every room, and then walking them down the corridor like a dog, and they have to come back and apologize and say, "I'm so sorry." That was pretty brutal, man, to be honest.
How did you feel? How did you feel when you was watching that?
So one thing that I have a very good relationship with the Nigerian community as well in the prison system was because like I would always call bullshit. I'm like, no, man, this is wrong. Like, and I would tell the number one, I'm like, you're British, right? Like you have a British citizenship. Like you live in like in London. Like you think this is okay? This is like 15th century, man. Like what are you like? And then like you want to be friends with me because we can relate, because we both like cocktail bars and jazz music. I'm like, bro, this is like, and so I got a reputation for the Nigerians as being somebody that fought for everybody else, not just myself. Like I could have used it to my advantage, right? I could have been talking to all the Chinese guys like, yeah, don't worry about these Africans. They're stupid. You know, you and me, it's you and me together. The same way the Chinese do with the police, right? I could have used the fact that I'm a white guy and I speak English and I've lived abroad. I could have gotten real close with the Chinese, and a lot of things would have been really easy for me. But I was stuck on like what's right. You know, you started a fight with that guy, and because he's 6'2" from West Africa, now you're scared. And the 5 Chinese in the room, you guys can never fight the 4 Nigerians. So you've had to go and call the police, and then the police have chained him and given him a half an hour of electricity. And then he comes back to the room, and we're all supposed to just, that's normal? Like, nah, man, that's bullshit. So by the time I left the detention center, by the time I got to prison, people had already known, like, yeah, there's a white guy who cares about black people's rights and about rights in general. And it's not like I did it knowingly. I fought every day for everybody. And I didn't have money for the first 300 days, right? And none of the Nigerian guys I was with had any money. But when I finally got money after 300 days in October, and I'll never forget, because my friend, another American guy, he's a Dominican American, I was on the toilet and he's banging the door, and he's like, the glass, he's like, yo, Matthew, your money's here. And I was like, bro, stop that. Leave me alone. I'm trying to use the toilet here with your shitty jokes. Like, can't you just leave me alone? I'm on the toilet. You can't see. And at that time I was so constipated. I was using the toilet like once every 3 weeks, right? So just to be on the toilet was like such a personal victory for me. And here's this guy mocking me because I haven't had money for 10 months, you know? And he's banging on the door. No, really, it's the money guy. And I was like, it's not the money guy, man. I don't have any money. Leave me alone. And then they calls me, and I went to the door, and the money guy was there. And I was like, no way. I've got money? Oh, wow. I went and sat down with all the Nigerians. I was like, what do we need? We need 9 toothbrush. We need 9 toilet paper. We need 9 soap, you know? And I just made sure that, like, now that I'm okay, we're all okay. Because I can't sit there and like the Chinese do. The Chinese amongst themselves, they don't help other Chinese. You know, one Chinese has got money. He's like stuffing his face all day, and all the other Chinese are just eating the cabbage, looking at him, you know, with a side eye. So I was like, I can't live like that. So I started to look after everybody in the room that was in the same situation as me. So I had a very good reputation in the detention center as somebody that doesn't take shit from the Chinese, is willing to throw hands, and somebody that actually like really walks the talk, you know? So I felt, as much as my life was falling down around me and that I'd been tortured and I started to go crazy, I started to live like an animal, I also felt this burgeoning, the start of something that I carried on through prison. And that was like, I gotta help people, man. There's people that are way worse off than me in this same situation. And as much as the Australian embassy is a complete joke, and as much as like I didn't have enough money to like bribe the officers and this sort of stuff, but like with what little resources I had, I was able to do a lot of good for a lot of people. And it only got more and more as I went to prison.
What about going to court? Was that bizarre?
Have you ever heard that Most Def song, Mathematics, when he's like 16 ounces to a key, 16 ounces to a pound, 20 more to a key, a 5-minute sentence hearing, and you're no longer free? That's literally me. Like, after I signed my confession, they're like, okay, yeah, okay, go back to your room. And then one day they just bang the door. They're like, go like, go like, go like. And I'm like, go where? They're like, go, go, go. And they strapped me into the tiger chair into the sick bay. And they brought out this little mobile phone. They put it on a stand. And they're like, yeah. And I was like, I see two people. I'm like, that looks like that embassy woman. And they're like, hi, Matthew. Sorry we haven't spoken to you because of coronavirus. We're in the courtroom now. You're going to court today. I was like, I'm going to court today? I haven't seen a lawyer. I haven't got like, who's going to court today? Like, are you sure you have the right guy? They're like, no, it's today. Yeah. So we've got a letter from your housemate. And then I was like, I haven't been given any legal advice. I haven't. So anyway, my 30 minutes with the embassy finishes, right? And I was so furious. And then they take the mobile phone. They literally spent the next like 15 minutes angling the phone so that, because there's like a bunch of squares, right? There's the judge, there's another bit, there's the prosecutor. They were trying to make sure that the judge and the Chinese coat of arms behind his head was in perfect proportion so that when he looked at me, you could see his whole face and you could see the crest of China. That took 3 times longer than my entire case. They were like, so you went to the store, you robbed everybody. How do you plead? Your lawyer said, and I was like, my lawyer? Who's my lawyer? They're like, that's your lawyer. I'm like, that's my lawyer. I got one question. Are you really a lawyer? She's like, I'm your lawyer. I was like, wow, these guys are not joking. I was like, this is like. So then they give me the sentence and they're like, cool. And I'm like, not cool. Like, I got a bunch of questions for the court. Like, one of the names they read out, they were like, from the witness testimony, Xu Hongmei. And I'm like, Xu Hongmei, that's my housemate. Like, what did she say? They're like, no, you're not allowed to read the testimony. I was like, what? There's testimony in my case. You mentioned the name of the person, but you can't read the testimony. They're like, yeah, the testimony's not for you. It's for the process. I was like a black comedy, right? But at that stage, like I'd lived under such horrendous conditions. I was like, I heard there's a phone in prison. I heard I can write letters in prison. I heard the food is better in prison. So whatever you guys do to me today, like, just let me get the fuck out of here and see my people, you know? So they gave me the sentence and I was like, so what about like my stuff when I was arrested? What about my business? What about everything? And they're like, oh, no, the court has no problem. You just go to prison and then like you write to the prosecutor's office. So I was like, okay. I went back to the room and then they wouldn't take me to prison. They were telling me no coronavirus. I was like, I'm not staying in this room for 4 years, bro. Like, I'm going to prison. They're like, no, like, prison's closed. I was like, but I've got my sentence. And they're like, doesn't matter. You have your sentence. Like, who are you? And I was like, but why? And there's one sentence when you're incarcerated in China that goes through the entire, it's the only common thread in your life in China. And they say, and you say, but why? And they're like, 中国没有为什么, which is no why in China. And you're like, but why? Like, why can't I go to prison? They're like, 中国没有为什么, 没有为什么. And you're like, what? Like, they're like, China, no why. So it took me another 6 months to go to prison. And I tried everything, man. I was like, I stopped eating. I went to the extremes of pushing the envelope for them to take me to prison. And they eventually took me to prison in May 2024. Oh, sorry, in May 2021. So I spent a total of 504 days in the detention center.
So are there any other crazy stories from the detention center before we go to prison?
Oh, man, every single day was crazy. But I tell you, like, one of the things that we did in that detention center was that, so in Chinese prison, you're not allowed to masturbate. You're not allowed to pray. You're not allowed to make anything. You're not allowed to like make flashcards so you can learn another language. You're literally not allowed to do anything, right? But we were trying to write to our family. So we would write, and then one guy showed me, like, you got to write super small. Like, you can't write. I was writing like 5-page letters, right? And then like, it's like, what do we do with this? And then it was like, no, you got to write so small. And then we roll it up and we like put it in people's shoes. And when they go home, like those people will call your people and everything, right? So that's when I started to get the idea. I was like, okay, like, I got to start acting like a criminal, man. Like, if I want to like get a better you know, I was like, for too long, I've been like, I'm an innocent guy. I haven't done anything wrong. I just want to speak to my embassy. I just want to, but after just getting like pulverized, right? And just becoming a paste and becoming like some strange person that I've never, like, I had such bad piles in the detention center. I was covered in blood most days and I didn't have another pair of underwear. So I'd be washing underwear. I had to sit down 14, 16 hours a day on cement, cold cement, and I didn't have, any medicine for piles, right? So, and piles is excruciating, man. Like piles really just, it's maddening, you know? And so there was a certain point where I was just like, okay, I've gotta start behaving like a criminal. I gotta like make alliances. I gotta start learning foreign languages. I gotta start really maneuvering here like I'm in prison because like this is my next 3 years. So I think something that was really important in the detention center for me was like understanding that you've just lost 4 years of your life and that you got to start making the most of it because the Chinese are not going to do anything for you. And I heard stories like, yeah, you can, you know, in prison, don't worry about it. You'll be eating KFC and Coca-Cola every day. Forget about it. And it was like, no, after seeing the way the Chinese were, I was like, no, man, that's based on old information before Xi Jinping took over. Like, there's nothing ahead of me that's going to be better than what I have right now. So something was born in me on that day. It was like, these are going to take away a huge chunk of your prime, man, of your 30s. So let's not make it a waste. So, and then I became a psycho. I became obsessed with personal development.
What was the transportation like to the new prison?
I went on my own, which was magical. And it was the first time in 504 days I'd been on my own. And I was just with the two officers and I was just there. Like, and you go out back into the real world. And like, one of the funny things was I saw the officer had an iPhone 12 and I was like, hey, I used to have the 11. And he's like, yeah, the 12 is very expensive. I was like, yeah, cool. And I went to the
So
prison and like,
are you like shackled up in a van?
I, of course, so especially for me, right? Armed robbery, violently resisting arrest. Like the police had every right to just like chain me anyhow they wanted. So I was just consistently chained and like they would chain my arms and then they chain my arms to my legs. And then, so when they took me to prison though, like when I went through the prison, I saw like a lot of foreigners and there was a basketball court and over here there's some grass areas, there's guys with like whippersnippers, we call them in Australia, like mowing the lawn. I was like, oh yeah, okay, this is gonna be dope. You know, I'm gonna get out there, I'm gonna kick some ass on the basketball court, I'm gonna be working out with all these Nigerian guys, I'm gonna go home like a beast. And then they put me in this group with all Chinese people, this induction group, and they gave me a little blue stool and I had to sit on this stool for like 5 hours and watch everybody else come in from other prisons around Beijing. And it's very unique. In China, when you go to a detention center, like if you're in Beijing, only Beijing people who have a Beijing resident permit can go to court in Beijing. So they collect all the criminals and then they send them to their, so they can go to court in their respective districts, right? Like if you're from Heilianjiang, you go to court in Heilianjiang. So then only the people that went with me to the prison from other prisons around Beijing, from other detention centers, sorry, they're all Beijingers, right? So you've been used to dealing with all of these scumbag Chinese from like Henan, all these little provinces, right? And even the Beijingers are very like arrogant towards them. Like, oh, they're not like us, they're not cultured. So I went in, I was with all of these Beijing guys and they all had really big cases. And I was thinking like, okay, but I didn't see any Chinese guys over there with the foreigners. So like, how come I've come here with like 100 Chinese and then there's no Chinese over there? And then it was explained to me much later that this was a transition from the detention center. And so you go there only with these Chinese guys. And that was war, man. It was me and the whole, they had one separate building. Like each cell block in Beijing #2 prison is 3 stories. And they had one separate like block that was isolated from the other block. And that's where they did this like transit, they call it, where you leave the detention center. And I'm in this cell and each cell's got 12 people. And these guys are having to write all of this communist thought every day. And the police are telling me like, just sit in the room. You don't have to write anything. You don't write Chinese anyway. And I was like, okay. And then they came to me and they made a big deal about I had to write a letter accepting my guilt and saying that, like, I'm so sorry, all the people that were affected by my crime and everything. And I was amazed because I was like, this is the first piece of paper I've ever seen that's been translated into English my entire trial. Like, I've been in the prison system for 18 months already, and I've never seen any English. And like, here we are. Like, of course, you guys want me to write a letter admitting my guilt and accepting my punishment. So this is all in English. So I rattled that off. But the conditions in that transit period were worse than the detention center. It was worse. The toilet in that block, the toilet from above was leaking. So, and you have to do everything as a room. So they're like, Liuban, like room 6, Liuban, all like, you guys go. So you all got to walk out, like, you know that computer game Lemmings? You all leave your cell and you follow the yellow line and you all walk together like a group, like Abbey Road, you know, like the Beatles crossing the street in Abbey Road. Everything you do for the next 45 days is in a group. So they're like, okay, like Liuban, like room 6, go to the toilet. You're like, I don't need to go to the toilet. It's like, well, if you don't go to the toilet now, you're not going to go to the toilet today. And so the conditions there were it was, at some point I was like, I want to go back to the detention center. Like, I can't live like that. How am I going to spend my entire sentence with these Chinese people? I'm going to murder somebody and end up like on a different trial. I was like, I can't live with these people.
So there was no toilet in the cell.
No, you have to go and you have to walk down a corridor and there's yellow lines and you have to follow those yellow lines. And if you don't, like, which I found later on when I went to general population, it's a huge crime to like not follow the yellow lines and all this stuff. But during that transit period, the hardest thing for me was I got transferred in May. Now, most people think of Beijing as like it's a winter city, right? It snows, they have the Winter Olympics. But if you've ever lived in China, it's so hot and humid, May, June, July, August, right? So I wasn't allowed to shower for 34 days when I transited. So I'm sitting there in the middle of May, right? It's like 34 degrees, 80% humidity. And I'm asking the officers, like, I want to shower. And they're like, no, you don't need to shower. Why you shower? Westerners always showering. You don't need to shower. You need to shut up and just wait before you go to general population. So for that 34 days, I didn't shower. You're only allowed to go brush your teeth and wash your face in the morning. So after the 34th day, I went to the toilet with everybody and you're holding your basin of water and you're supposed to be washing your face. And I just stripped off my clothes and had a shower. The police were going crazy, like I just murdered somebody. Police came running from everywhere. They had tasers. They were like, what are you doing? Like, are you crazy? You can't shower. The prison bureau is watching you on the CCTV. I was like, dude, like, I explained to them, like, Sancha Suten, like 34 days. I'm going crazy, man. Like, I'm going crazy. I'll shower right now. And we went back to the room and the Chinese were like, respect, man. We respect you. Like, that's crazy. Like, you're in so much trouble, but like, how can they not even let us shower? And I was like, but how are you guys not saying anything? Like, how is it only one foreigner has balls? Like, I'm the only guy here that's willing to fight for a basic human right, like showering. Like, that's why I couldn't envisage myself living with the Chinese for my entire sentence. Because it's like, only the Westerners question. The Chinese don't question anything. They're like, yeah, we can't shower. I'm like, I'm gonna shower. Wait, I'm gonna shower. And after that, I think they transferred me to general population after 45 days. So I had 11 days of showers after that.
So was there lots of foreigners in GP?
Yeah, so one thing that's the number 2 prison was built in the 50s and it used to house a lot of people. It used to house up to like 2,500, which is very small by Chinese standards. Some Chinese prisons have 100,000 people, 50,000 people. But it used to be a big hub for work. They used to have a big factory there. And they used to do all of the laundry for like all the 5-star hotels in China in the 90s. And they had a population of 2,500. They had a big workforce. And then at that time, they only had 3 foreign teams of people. They call it team in China, like it's a socialist country, right? So in prison, you're part of a reform group and a work team, and you go to the factory to like work to show that you're reformed, right? So everything is like team 1 or team 2 or team 3. So, but that's basically like a work group, and it's basically just one floor of the building. That's team 1, the first floor. Team 2 is the second build. And so you're with 100 people, but when you go out to factory or you go out for whatever you go out, you see other groups of people. But you and your 100 people are stuck together. And so there used to be 18 teams. There used to be like almost 2,000 people. And then for some reason in 2012, I think there was too much corruption in that prison with the Chinese. One guy called Han Li, he he murdered a baby after just being released after serving a life sentence. So he'd served a life sentence, and he'd served that life sentence in about 13 years. And so it was like, hold on a minute. How did this Chinese guy serve an entire life sentence in 13 years? And then he went out and reoffended. So at that point, the Justice Department were like, no, there's something wrong with Beijing #2 prison. So they decided, they just came out of nowhere in 2012. They took all the Chinese in the middle of the morning at like 4 a.m, hooded them all, put them all in like huge big tour buses and took them to other prisons. And then what was left over is this massive prison with only 300 people. And so one of the problems that we faced in the prison was, like, the police are also prisoners, right? Because the lower police that are called like room police, the ones that are in charge of the day-to-day operation with the prisoners, they're on CCTV and they're also being monitored by a prison bureau. So if I do something wrong as a prisoner, like for example, I put my hands behind my back, right? That's an infraction. So I get my points cut, and the officer on duty also gets his points cut, and he loses money at the end of the month. So there's this insane paranoia in that prison from the officers, and this like competition between prison bureau, which sits above team officers. And then it's like one guy gets promoted from team to prison bureau because he has a relationship, and he uses that relationship to fuck over all the guys that he used to work with. So like on top of just the fact that you're in prison, you're dealing with this twisted Chinese system, which just is nonsensical at the best of times. And then you've got this added layer of everything you're doing is on CCTV, and every single movement, every single thing that you do. The following day, there's a whole team of officers that just go over and watch the entire video from the day before. And they're like, oh, yesterday when Matthew went to the toilet, he's supposed to go to the toilet with 3 people. But when they left the toilet, the first 2 guys went a little bit faster. And then, so on the camera, it looked like 2 people went to the toilet and 1 person. So this is a big problem. And you're like, bro, in other prison, people have knives and heroin. They're murdering each other. They're making tattoos. They're smuggling guns. They're gambling. But in Chinese prison, it's like somebody didn't walk fast enough out of the toilet, and that's it. I was like, so it was just insane. So the Beijing #2 prison really suffered from that fact that there was only 300 foreign prisoners in a prison that's designed for 2,500, but the amount of staff, like the amount of officers, stayed the same. So it's just a terrible place to live.
Who was the most interesting characters you met there?
Man, I met some characters, man, in prison. Like, you know yourself. you met some crazy people. I probably wouldn't say who's the most interesting, but I would say some of the guys were very inspirational. One of the Nigerian guys, his name is Brown, and he's been in prison since 2004. And he was basically, some girl got caught with a lot of heroin, and they basically tied it back to he had bought the ticket for her. And the entire time he had maintained that he was a legitimate businessman in Nigeria and a legitimate businessman in China, and that he'd moved from South Korea to China to do business, and that his friend had just asked him to use his bank card to book a flight for this girl, and that the girl had been caught trafficking drugs, and that it wasn't his drugs. There was no connection between him and the girl, no connection between him and drugs. And he had fought the system for 9 years in Dongguan and in Shenzhen, and just refused to sign any documents, refused to speak to his embassy, refused to do anything. And they originally gave him the death sentence. And like, this guy was chained to the floor for like 30 days at a time. This guy was like, they really did a number on him for about a decade. And eventually they came back and they were like, oh, you can't really trace the drugs to this guy. So they changed his sentence, which is something I've never seen in China. They admitted they made a mistake, and they were like, we're just going to give him like a commuted death sentence. And he basically was still in prison in 2024 and had 5 years to go. But one of the things was like, to see a guy like that had been through so much adversity. He was such a pillar of the Nigerian community, and that his door was just always open for everybody. Everybody could come to him. You would pray with him. You could eat with him. You could just discuss your case with him. He was like an encyclopedia. And I got to stay in the same room as him for about 9 months before I was released home. And just so that, it was like, to watch somebody like that carried their adversity with such dignity and grace really inspired me to be like, yeah, you gotta suck it up, man, and just just get through it. And there's another guy who's like a brother to me, Peter Moomin, and I've tried to bring up Peter's case a few times, but the legacy media doesn't really want to have anything to do with it because Peter's a drug trafficker. By his own admission, he was arrested with ICE traveling from Beijing to Sydney. And his casemate left in the morning. She had 5 kilos and she was arrested in Sydney. And she ratted on Peter and basically told the police that there's another guy coming from Sydney, from Beijing, sorry, to Sydney, and he's got a lot of ice. And so anyway, she was arrested and she was given 10 years and she served 6 years. Now, Peter was arrested at the airport and he's been in prison for 13 years and he's not coming home until 2038. Yeah, and he had 2 kilos and she had 5 kilos. So the juxtaposition of those two and the fact that she gave the information and then she went home after 6 years. But again, you know, Peter's another guy, because of the detention, the conditions in the detention are so gnarly. Most of the guys in the detention center, they end up having tuberculosis or hepatitis or some kind of like communicable disease, right? And so Peter's been suffering from communicable disease for many, many, many years, and he's never received any medical treatment. But despite all of that, despite having no contact with his family, despite having zero to no contact with the outside world, his child or his ex-wife, he's still able to counsel young guys that have just been given life sentences. He's still able to, even like he mediates when there's a fight between 2 different groups in the prison. The police will call Peter, not to snitch, but to mediate, be like, Peter, can you go and sort this out? Because just everybody in the prison just respects him as just such a down-to-earth, such hardworking, like honest guy. So I think when you mix with people like that, you kind of realize that like prison brings out these things inside you that very few people on the outside, you know, really uphold in today's society, right? Like being honest is meaningless, like outside, right? Just getting paid, getting as much money as you can to have as much stuff, like, but being able to talk to somebody and knowing that what you tell that person is in confidence, asking somebody for their advice and them giving you advice, spending time with somebody that doesn't actually want anything from you, that just enjoys your company. I think these things are lost on us, but I think the guys in prison, they really exhibit this wanting other people to all get along. You know, a lot of people like to start fires here, start fires there, and then watch it burn, right? And when you meet guys that have been in prison for such a long time and they're always the first to call for peace and call for level heads and like, let's just talk it out and let's just, you know, so I think those two are probably some of the most inspiring people that I've ever met. And there's one other guy from Zambia called Moses. Just quickly, I'm actually trying to lobby the Papua New Guinea government to get Peter Moomin sent home. And like, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a professional, I'm not an NGO. I'm just a guy who made a promise to a guy that I'm not going to forget you and I'm going to do the best I can. Peter asked me if I could try and contact the foreign minister from Papua New Guinea, Mr. Justin Kachenko, and to just formally request that Peter be transferred home, because Peter's not allowed to make that request. His embassy's not allowed to handle that, not allowed to write this, that, like, so he's at a situation where he's asked me to do that on his behalf. And then since I've been out for the last year, I've been lobbying his government to try and get him transferred under Article 8 of the Chinese Constitution. I've put him back in contact with his family. I've also put him back in contact with his embassy. Since 2016, he had not had a visit from his embassy. He had not received any money from anywhere. So my wife and I have helped him reconnect with his family, be financially stable, independent, and then the Papua New Guinea government has actually reinstated his quarterly stipend. But if anybody's out there that can help me, that has relationships in Papua New Guinea, like I would really like some help, because I'm just one man, you know, I'm a one-man army. But when Peter was sentenced to life in prison, he was not sentenced to death. He was sentenced to life. He has a date where he's supposed to go home, but when you leave somebody in prison with tuberculosis or hepatitis C for 16, 18, 20 years, they're not allowed to practice their faith. They're, like, you're going to kill the person. And I don't think anybody deserves to die for, just through the negligence of the Chinese prison system. So if anybody's out there, please help me get Peter Moomin home and help me get Peter Moomin on the ticket so that people are talking about it in Papua New Guinea Parliament, and that it's something that we're focusing on and trying to raise the awareness to his plight, because like so many of the other guys there, they don't have a voice. There's nobody that's fighting for these people,
Yeah, well said, man. They're like invisible, aren't they, to the public? That's why the authorities can get away with anything they want to get away with until you put it in the public eye. So you said something earlier about different groups having fights. Have you got an example story of two groups having a fight?
So, my sentence was 4 years, right? And I was supposed to come home on the 2nd of January, 2024. And about February 2022, they brought a large contingent of Taiwanese guys to the number 2 prison. And these guys they do telephone fraud. And some of them have been in African countries, Kenya, they're in Spain. And we had a nice little ecosystem in the prison. There was like 60 to 70 Pakistanis, and they'd all been there since 2006, 2007. They all had very long sentences. There was a lot of Nigerian guys. Most of them had life sentences. Most of them had 5 to 10 years left. They rounded up a lot of people before the first Olympics in China. And so a lot of those guys, I was still there. They were still there when I got there. They'd been there for 18 years, 19 years. And you had some Afghanis, you had some elderly Japanese, because for whatever reason, people use elderly Japanese guys to traffic drugs, like 95-year-old Japanese guys. But we had a good mix, right? And there was not that many foreigners, like from like OECD countries, but the Nigerians are God-fearing, right? They're deeply religious. So they were in charge of a lot of things. As far as like barbing day, when it's the barbing day, everybody's gonna cut their hair. The Nigerian guys are in charge. There's one guy from Zambia called Moses. When it's like the police were doing anything, they would be like, Moses, you go and relay this information, like a corridor leader, and everybody got along, right? Like the Pakistanis, they were outnumbered by the Nigerians, and they both, there was no love lost, but they'd lived there together for such a long time. And because the Pakistanis were outnumbered 3 to 1, they would flare up and they'd be like, wah, 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 and the Nigerians, wah, 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 and then like the cool heads would prevail and everything was okay. And then out of nowhere, 200 of these Taiwanese guys got transferred from Spanish prison. And they were all jacked up and they were all tattooed and they were all like, and they were playing a very good game because they speak Putonghua to the officers, right? They speak Mandarin, the mainland Mandarin. Then they speak English to the foreigners, right? To the Nigerians, to everybody. And then they speak their own language between themselves, Hokkien, right? So they would go to the foreigners and be like, we're not like these mainlanders. We're cool. We're from Taiwan. We're cool with you guys. We like you guys. And then they would go to the police and be like, these stupid foreigners, they're so stupid. You got to trust us. So they ended up muscling the Nigerians, the Pakistanis, everybody else out of all of the positions, right? They took over the kitchen. They took over the barbershop. They took over everything. And our food started to become ridiculous. Like, you went from getting maybe 5 grams of chicken, which was a lot, to getting like particles of chicken. Or you went from getting like 10 grams of egg in your soup to getting like particles of egg, and watching the Taiwanese guys eating like all of your food basically. And not just that, like they created a black market. They were like siphoning off goods from the kitchen and then selling it. So they would like steal pepper. And then there's no spices in any of the food. There's no salt in any of the food. And then these guys have got pepper and they've got salt in the room. And one thing about the Africans is like, they love their food, man. They love Jesus. They love to sing. They love to pray. But they love food. And as soon as you started to mess with the African community's food, it became a big problem. So one day, I'm 6 months ready to go home. And I'm writing all the letters to my then fiance and to my father. I'll be home in 6 months. I can't wait. And, everything's going so great. we went out to shower, and when you go out to shower, you go out in a group of 100 people. You got to sing all the communist songs and Mayo Gunchangdong and all these 1950s red songs and from the Long March and all this, and you're marching like a complete moron. And I'm coming back from the washroom. We're all marching towards the team, and then the fight's on, and it's basically like the Zambian guy and the Nigerian guys. They started fighting with the Taiwanese, and then it's just on. And I ran because one of my little brothers from Mexico, he was going home in 2 months. So I was like, okay, I got to get there. And because he likes to fight as well. He's a fighter. So I was like, I got to get there before he punches somebody. And on my way to get to him, somebody came running straight up to me, and I just popped him because he was 6'2". I'm like 5'9", right? So, and I popped the guy, and I just destroyed his nose, and he went down like a sack. And the people were screaming because there was so much blood. Just unluckily, there was so much blood on his face. And I was taken to solitary confinement on that night, where I stayed for 194 days. But that was probably the worst like brawl that I saw, 70 on 70 brawl that I was able to witness the entire time that I was there.
What was solitary like then?
I have a hard time with solitary, Shaun, like for a multitude of reasons. Like the first reason was like I was 6 months from going home, and I'd seen other guys break other guys' noses and get like 30 points reduction, or like and then I got sent to solitary, and you're only supposed to spend 15 days in the solitary, the one-man room, and then you're supposed to be transferred out to like a larger 3-man room where you spend the rest of your like 5 months or 4 months when you get punished with solitary, right? So I'm taken and I'm putting in, I was put in the one-man room. The room I was in didn't have a fan, it didn't have air con, didn't have a window. It's 1.2 meters by 1.8 meters. There's a squat toilet. And I was telling the police, like, I've been here for a long time now, like, can I be transferred to the larger room? And they were like, no, see, you're not in solitary confinement. You're in Gurli Shencha, which means like you're being like, you're under surveillance. You've been separated and you're under surveillance. And they were coming to me and saying like, we're investigating your case because the damages were so bad, because the injury was so bad. The case has gone to an outside prosecutor, and then we have to like review all the case and everything. So you just have to sit here in solitary and just be quiet and don't cause too many problems and just ride it out until we. And I was like, am I going home? That's all I care about. Am I going home? And nobody could tell me whether I was going home. Scheduled to go home in 6 months. And so I stayed in that room for the 4 or 5 months of summer. The temperatures in that room were 55 degrees. I started to get green fingernails. I started to get really, really unhealthy from just the being in your own, soaking in your own sweat. There's zero ventilation. And of course, there's 3 CCTV cameras that work in the room, but there's no air con. So I was housed there, and I realized pretty early that like I was going to go crazy because there wasn't so much light in the room. There was only light in the room for 2 hours in the morning and then 2 hours in the afternoon. I didn't have any books. I didn't have a pen. I didn't have any paper at the start. And they weren't going to transfer me. My embassy by that stage didn't care about me. They didn't care about me from day one, let alone after almost 5 years. So I made a conscious decision to myself. I was like, you know what? This room's either going to get really, really small and I'm going to fight it and it's going to break me, or I'm going to like sit back and just like, yeah, this is me. I'm going to embrace it. And I'm going to go with all of the hallucinations. I'm going to go with all of it. And I'm just going to make this room into my canvas and see how bad it gets. Like I'm going to lean in and then just, and so through that whole period, they were interrogating me for the new case. So I was taken out for like 5 hours at a time every day. I was asked what happened, why did you punch him, what did you punch him with, and they just kept going over and over and over and over the same questions. And then I would be taken back to my cell. And the whole time I was there, I wasn't allowed to work out. I wasn't allowed to do anything. It wasn't until after about 4 months that I got books. I got the Bible. I got some pen and paper. And I was just living my routine in there. I was just trying to survive. And my embassy came and I told them, like, I've got green fingernails. I'm going crazy. I shouldn't be in this room. It's so hot. I need you to write a letter to the foreign minister. I need you to do something. These people are going to charge me with another crime. This is bullshit. And they were like, well, the prison bureau said that your fingers are okay and that they've given you treatment. I'm like, look at my fingers. They're green. Like, who? The prison bureau told you that I'm receiving treatment, but I'm sitting in front of you telling you that I haven't received treatment. Look at my fingers. And she was like, well, we'll discuss your welfare with the prison bureau. So then I realized that even like my embassy was in on it, and that the Chinese people that operate the Australian embassy are completely complicit in everything that happens to Chinese people in Australian prison. Australians in Chinese prison. But throughout my time in the 194 days that I spent in solitary, I was chained by my leg to the floor with a big, like, I guess like 14, 15-pound chain, like a marine links on it. And I was pretty much not allowed to do anything. And then I started to go to war with the police because I realized, I was like, okay, like, there's nothing worse they can do to me, right? Like, so when they tell me to sit down, I'm like, I'm not going to sit down. And they're like beeping me on the intercom. You need to sit down. You need to sit down. You need to watch the news. And I'm like, there's no TV in here, man. Who is watching the news? You guys are crazy, not me. And they're like, shut up, shut your mouth. You need to sit down. So then I would stand up and just start masturbating in the middle of, because everybody in prison in China, you have to sit down and watch the news at the same time at 6 p.m., right? It's called Xinwen Lianbo, and it's like the state-run media, the propaganda news. So it's a big deal that all of the prisoners at the same time sit down and watch the news. And I was just standing up masturbating, or I'd be using the toilet, or I'd strip naked and just lay on the floor, or I'd be doing jumping jacks. Like, I got to the point where the police were so fed up with me that I started to drive them crazy and transfer all of the pressure of me being in solitary confinement, I started to put on their head. And eventually I was taken 2 weeks before I was scheduled to go home. They decided that, okay, you need to pay compensation, you need to do this, you need to do that. And I have basically said, like, I'm not paying any compensation. I'm not doing anything. Like, you guys can take me to court. I haven't seen a lawyer. They gave me a piece of paper that said, like, you have to plead guilty that you ran over to this guy out of nowhere and punched him for no reason. And if you argue the material facts of the case, it sounds a lot like my first case, right? That you'll be given a harsher sentence, maybe 2 years, maybe 5 years. But if you just plead guilty to the fact that you punched this Taiwanese kid for no reason, then you'll probably receive a sentence of 12 months. So I, again, signed my leniency agreement. I went to court, and it was the day that I went to court, I'll never forget, because I was chained, my hands, and then my hands were chained to my legs. And then I had a hood on my head, and they told me to walk to the car. And I was like, how can I walk to the car? Like, I'm literally like squeezed up like a beetle. And they were like, you got to walk to the car. So I walked to the car, and then they like lift me in the car. And the whole way in the car, they're pushing my head down, like, don't look out the window. Don't. I was like, what can I see? I've got a bag on my head. You guys are crazy. I'm not Osama bin Laden. And I went to the court, and they were all so serious that, like, oh, you've committed another crime in China. And I was just laughing at that point. I was like, you guys are just, this is hysterical. They read out the police reports. And that's a funny thing, because like I said about the Chinese with foreign passports, the Australian guy that I went to visit the embassy with, that's an Australian Chinese, that was like, we're praying for you, Matthew. Everybody's so worried about you. He gave testimony in my case that when I punched the guy, I punched him like, he said, because I only punched the guy once, right? In self-defense, that's it. Once I punched him, he fell down. They went and got other prisoners that were like, yeah, he punched him 5 times. And one guy was like, he punched him with a hairbrush. So even when they read out the testimony, they were like, Hojia. And I was like, Hojia? Hojia is an Australian. And even the embassy woman was like, Hojia, because they were sitting behind me. So they were like, yeah, they gave me my new sentence. And the Australian embassy was sitting behind me the whole time. And they left, right? As soon as I got my verdict. So then when they went back to I went back to solitary, and they told me, if you appeal your case, your original case is finished on the 2nd of January, right? Now is the 5th of December. If you appeal your case, it will take longer than your original sentence. So we will take everything that you have in this prison, we will throw it away, we'll throw away your prison number, and we'll take you back to the detention center. And then you'll wait in the detention center before you go to court for your appeal. And that could take 6 months, that could take 2 years. But you will get that, and then you go back to the prison as a new prisoner. You go through transit, you go through all of the rigmarole again. And at this stage, I had the journal that I'd been keeping, the micro-printed journal that I'd been keeping. So I couldn't appeal. I was like, I have to stay here because they're going to take all of my stuff and they're going to throw it away. And I've hidden this journal over the last 3 years. So I've just got to not appeal. And if you appeal, nothing's going to happen anyway. So they took me back to the general population. And when I got to general population, I used the phone, called my people. I'm just thinking, okay, my dad knows I'm not coming home in 2 weeks. My girlfriend, my fiance, like these people, they're aware that I'm not coming home. And I get on the phone and I'm like, so dad, yeah, I'm not going to be home. He's like, what? I'm like, you mean the embassy didn't tell you? No, the embassy didn't give us any updates. I'm like, the Australian embassy was in the courtroom. They witnessed me. They stayed only until my verdict. They witnessed me get another 9-month sentence. I was originally sentenced to 9 more months. And they never cared to tell my family that I wasn't coming home in 2 weeks. I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it. So I went back, and then I spent the next 9 months in the general population. That was really hard, man. Just, I was the first person in the history of the Beijing #2 prison to have another sentence added on.
How heartbreaking was it to get that sentence?
Man, so I had spent such a long time trying to get in contact with my fiance, right? And trying to get in contact with my family, trying to build bridges, trying to remain relevant in my life. You're only allowed 1 5-minute phone call a month. Your letters are taking 6 months to leave the prison. The incoming letter is taking 4 months. So you're reading a letter from your fiance and it's dated September and it's already July, and like you can't remain relevant in your life. But we got to that stage where I'm coming home, and it's like, it's all behind us. My family's freaking out, right? Like, what's he going to be like? I mean, he's 5 years in a Chinese prison, but there was light at the end of the tunnel. It's where the last 6 months. So then to go through that period of 6 months of the solitary confinement, I went from 72 kilos to 57 kilos. When I got back to solitary confinement, like when I got back to general population, I was scattered, man. And then I'm trying to contact my family. And I just kept thinking to myself, like, is my fiance ever going to forgive me that, like, over a fight, like, I literally punched somebody and I lost 9 months, and like, we've got the green light from her parents that I'm coming out of prison and that we're going to get married, and all of these things are quite hard for somebody to be in front of, right? And be like, hey, mom and dad, guess what? That my fiance that's already in prison, that you're already thinking this is just a terrible match for their daughter. Guess what? Like, he's going to not come home. He's going to be in prison even longer. Now it's like, I just felt so helpless. I felt so desperate. I felt so ashamed. I felt so many things, man. But, my father stood by me my entire incarceration, no matter what me and my father had on before that. When I finally reached out to him, he thinks I reached out to him for money, but like, I just reached out for him because when they told me coronavirus was killing people all around the world, I just wanted to know, like, no matter what's happened with you and me in the past, is my dad okay? But once we did make contact, my dad stood by me the entire time, and as did my fiance, my now wife. So this thing that I built up in my mind of like, oh my God, I've lost everything. I've lost everyone. What am I going to do? I got back to general population, and they were like, it's okay. Like, we stand by you. Like, we love you. Probably don't self-defend yourself ever again. Like, anyone wants to punch you in the face. I think my dad said, keep your hands in your pockets. But yeah, it was heavy, and it's not something that anybody should have to deal with. And typical the Chinese, they did it exactly that way. They left it until 2 weeks before I was supposed to go home to tell somebody, you're not going home. You have another 9 months. And at that point, I was so exhausted by the Chinese, their behavior, their prison system, just the Chinese in general. one thing I kind of wanted to say was that like the Chinese are so quick to get offended, right? Chinese netizens are offended for the way the Chinese were portrayed by Dior in some ad, or the Chinese are shocked at this portrayal of them. Like my entire incarceration, from the minute I was arrested to the minute I was released, I was deeply offended by the Chinese police, by the Chinese prosecutor, the Chinese court system, my fellow Chinese inmates, the Chinese embassy staff. The Australian embassy is not run by Australians, it's run by Chinese. I was offended by my former housemate, who once she knew that I was deported, basically stole everything that I had in the house and refused to let my family contact her, refused to let my embassy contact her. So at each and every way along the way, I was deeply offended by China and Chinese people, the Chinese system. And I'm somebody that had worked in China before. I had good relationships with the Chinese. I was paying tax. I registered a company. I employed Chinese people. I defended the Chinese to other people. When I left New York, my friends were like, "Are you crazy? You want to go live with these people? These people are animals. What are you doing, man?" And I was like, "No, no, China's changed. China's changed. You know, it's so convenient and all that." And I'd really drunk the Kool-Aid. But yeah, I was deeply offended, and it continued throughout the whole process. So if there's any Chinese people who are offended by my statement of like how wicked the Chinese are, or how stupid the Chinese were, or how corrupt the Chinese was, like I'm not sorry. Like you should be offended, because I was deeply offended. But and then eventually it was time to go home.
So the East African community welcomed you back and helped you put on some weight?
Yeah. So you know yourself, right? When you're in prison, there's a lot of people that don't speak a lot of languages. There's a lot of people that don't speak their own language. There's a lot of people that don't write so much. There's a lot of people that they don't even understand their own paperwork. And I had a lot of guys come up to me, a lot of Nigerians specifically, and I'm not targeting the Nigerian community. Those guys are like my family. But those guys are hustlers. A lot of them, they haven't had a lot of school, and they would come to me and be like, "Matthew, like, don't tell my people, but here's my paperwork. Can you help me, bro? When am I going home?" And I'm like, "Bro, how long you been here?" "I've been here since 2006, man. When am I going home?" I'm like, "Bro, it says you're not going home here until like 2034. He'd be like, 2034, 10 more years. I'm like, yeah, yeah. And so people would come to me because, and I think you would probably understand this, right? When you're highly literate and you can write, people come to you in the prison and they're like, "Hey, man, can you help me write an appeal for me? Can you help me write my Supreme Court appeal? Can you help me write to my family? Can you help me do this? Can you help me do that?" So I developed a pretty good relationship with the African community because of what had happened in the detention center. And then not just what had happened in the detention center, but the way I'd gotten very close to them. And the fact that I'm a Baptist and these guys are all Catholic was like, we have something in common. So I started getting very close with the Nigerians, right? And it's like, if you learn 5% of the language, then you gain 95% of the respect. And one of my room leaders was a Zambian guy, an amazing guy called Moses. His father was the former foreign minister of Zambia, and had a party, and some Russian girl ended up getting murdered because there was a fight, and she went to break up the fight, and then she eventually ended up being thrown away from the fight, and like she impaled herself on a clothes hook. Yeah, so you can imagine, like at one point, even the Russian government wanted him extradited for the death penalty. So that guy had gone through, and he's like an older brother to me. He helped me with a lot of things. He helped me understand, like, when you try to push things too hard, you actually push them away from you. Sometimes you just got to relax and let things come to you, and you got to be patient, and good things will come to you. And he was very, very wise to prison life, understanding yourself, understanding that you have to, live by a certain creed no matter what else is happening around you. But one night I heard him talking to another guy, and I was like, "Dude, what is that language?" And he's like, "It's Swahili." And I was like, "I thought you were Nigerian." He's like, "I'm Zambian, man." And I was like, "Oh, wow, that sounds like it's dancing in my ears. Like, I love it." And I got close to them, obviously, because he was my room leader. And so there was a couple of Tanzanian guys and another guy from Kenya that were all speaking Swahili. And I was like, "Bro, I have to learn this. You guys have got to teach me." And what I said to you about, you got to get close, and you get close to other people, and then realizing the Chinese are not going to educate me, right? It's not a prison like preconceived notions that people have about Chinese prison. You know, where you go to prison, you can get an MBA and you go to the gym and you did like, no, man, there's nothing for you. It's a wasteland, right? So you got to self-motivate. And I was like, okay, these Colombian guys, I'm very close with them. Teach me Spanish. So I'm learning Spanish. I'm educating myself. I'm learning Spanish. I can get to conversational level Spanish with these guys. The Swahili speakers, teach me Swahili. I gotta break up my 4 years and I gotta try and add as many things so that when I get out of prison, it hasn't been a complete waste. And so those guys, when I got back, the fact that they were the ones that started the fight, that I went to the aid of Jonathan, that was very close with them, and that I defended and I broke one of these Taiwanese guys' nose, that kind of sent a message to the Taiwanese as well. It's like, you guys can do this one, but you can't fight with us, right? Like, you guys are tiny. You got all the tattoos in the world, but like, we will you guys if it gets to that. So the police can only save you so far, but like, look at what Matthew did and imagine what we will do to you, you know? So that really put me in high esteem with the African community, especially with the West African and the East African community. And they became very close to me. And one of the privileges I had was when I was released was speaking to these people's families in Swahili, because I managed to smuggle out all of the contact details on the journal, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I got to call people's families and be like, you know, Nilikuwa ndani jela ya China pamoja na kaka yako. I was in prison with your brother. And these people are like, huh? Wow, your Swahili is amazing. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, you know, like I learned, your brother taught me Swahili. And my wife is there like, speaking Swahili to these people's families in Uganda. Like, so that was quite amazing. And I felt in a way, I was like, they kind of felt like they owed me something. So they helped me when I was at my worst, when I came back from solitary, and they really put in a lot of time, but in a lot of ways, without that brotherhood that I had with the Swahilis, with the Nigerians, without these people in my life, like, it would have been a very lonely, very sad 5 years. So I was very grateful for them, and then to pick up some of their language along the way was incredible.
So what's the insane story of smuggling the journal out?
So the journal is what led me to you, what has been such a life force for me when I was in prison. You know, like I was in the restaurant industry, and the restaurant industry is one of the most thankless, disgusting, like it's a terrible industry, right? It's on the cusp of fame, which is one of those industries which is like hairdressing, right? Like the best hairdressers in the world are like at this peak, and they're like making tons of money, they're living this jet set lifestyle, and then everybody else is just cutting some douchebag's hair, right? It's the same with restaurant business. The top chefs are like celebrities in their own right. You know, the top bartenders, and you're mixing with ball players, you're mixing with actors, you're mixing with, so people in the restaurant industry get this feeling that they are like some, you know, and so it's an industry of ego, but it's an industry of just being like shat on all day by assholes, basically. And there's been a weird shift in the global community. Like, people don't go out anymore to enjoy dinner. They go out to like take pictures of dinner and post it online and then write reviews on Zomato. And it's like the act of taking your family out for dinner has been completely lost since about 2017. And now it's just become like an industry. And so I was tired of that. And I've completely lost my train of thought, Shaun.
The journal.
Yeah. So I'd always been a very busy person. I'd always been somebody that was like, I always had to have something that I had to control. I was a manager. I always had to have a staff. I've always worked my ass off. And then I found myself in the prison, and I was just like, I'm so bored, man. You know, like I got all these thoughts in my head, and like, I can't talk to anybody. I can't call my fiance. I can't do anything. And I've got no privacy, right? Like and then so I was like, I started to just create privacy. I started to just have this very straightforward conversation with myself, and be like, okay, I think today we did very well. And I think the reasons we did well is we did this, but I think the things we didn't do very well, we could have done this a little bit better. And I started to have this like active dialogue with myself, and started to like manage myself, right? And along the way, I started to also comment on what was happening inside the prison, as far as the atrocities that I'd seen, as far as people that inspired me, as far as things that I just thought were despicable, things that I'd noticed about the Chinese system, about Chinese people as a whole. my pining for my life prior to prison, you know, putting on a nice pair of clothes, putting on a nice shirt, speaking to my dad, having dinner with my wife, like all of these things that, and I just started to put it all together. And I ended up just creating privacy in a place where there was none. And that's all it started out as, right? It was just like, okay, I got a journal, like a lot of guys, I got a journal, and I just, you know, I write a bunch of shit in my journal, and it's not that important. And then I noticed some North Korean guys, they smuggled something out of the prison one day in their shoes. And when you're about to go home, they give you your clothes that you're going to wear on the day you go home. So these guys showed me, like, in the sole of their shoes, they had a bunch of US dollars. And they also had all of these, like, things that they, and I was like, what is that? And they were like, oh, it's the inside of a coronavirus mask, right? And I was like, okay. So because North Korea doesn't have an embassy in China, so the North Korean guys that were left behind wrote letters and gave it to the North Korean guys to give to their family, because it's like, you can't give me your WhatsApp and I just call your wife in North Korea when I get home, right? So only North Koreans could help other North Koreans. So they were laden with all of these messages that they had to give to their family members, right? For other people. And I noticed, and I was like, dude, did you write that by hand? And they're like, yeah, like, how else are you going to write here? Like, we have a typewriter. And I was like, what the fuck? Never seen anything like it. So I remembered what the American guy had told me in the detention center about writing small. And I was like, this actually happened when I was in solitary confinement. I tried to see if I could get it as small as I could get it. And one guy, the Scottish guy that led me to you, the one that was like, you got to get on with Shaun Attwood. He was like, dude, once it's written in micro print on the mask, it's now art. And I was like, and he's a photographer, and I was like, nah, man, it's not. It's just my ramblings of a madman. And he was like, no, the content is amazing on its own. But, and the fact that you've detailed so much stuff in this prison, you've detailed all the slave labor, you've detailed like companies, mobile numbers, emails, like all of the details of all of the companies we've worked for. You got to get this thing out, Matthew. Like, this is now art. This needs to be on the wall somewhere. And he's like, look at it. Like, when you look at the aesthetic of this mask, and it's in such tiny writing, he's like, not everybody will get it, but there's people you will show and they'll be like blown away. And he's like, this is what you got to do with this experience. Like, you got to channel all of your energy into this. This is what's going to make the last 5 years worth it for you. And I was like, cool. So then, you know, I started transcribing it, and word got around. 3 or 4 people knew that I had been transcribing, and I had a lot of it. It was like about that much, you know. So when I went to solitary, I knew I was going to solitary. The first thing I did, I ran upstairs and I got it from its existing hiding place, and I gave it to Moses from Zambia. And I was like, Moses, this is the most important thing in my life. Like, that, I don't think I've ever had anything in my life that has given me such purpose. Like, and he knew that because he's my best friend in the prison. So he was like, bro, I got you. Don't worry. I'm going to get it to you inside solitary. However I get it to you, I'm going to get it to you. And then you're going to have it with you in solitary. And I'm like, that's amazing. And sure enough, we were trading messages between solitary confinement. And big ups to my brother from Uganda, Collins, who was topping up my water. And as he would top up my water, I would put a message under the lid of the water bottle. And then he would quickly grab the message and then leave another message right under the police's eyes. We did some close-up magic together. But it was communicated to me that the journal was too big and that he couldn't get it to me in solitary confinement. And I was devastated because I wasn't sure that I was getting another sentence at that stage. So once my new sentence was there, I got sent back to general population, but to a different team. And then Moses managed to roll up the journal entries and send it to me. So in the sending it to me, he used his Tanzanian brothers, right? And so they were in my team. So they would go see people at the hospital. Someone, quickly give this one to Matthew, you know? And then the Tanzanian guys were like, so you're taking this thing outside? I was like, yeah. They're like, how do you plan on taking all of that outside? I was like, I haven't really thought about that. And I didn't want to tell them that I knew when I got arrested, there was all rips all over my North Face jacket. And I knew if I could just get my North Face jacket back to wash it, I would quickly put it inside the jacket and keep it there. And they were like, no, bro, no, that's not going to work. Like, anything you can think of is not going to work. The only way you can get something out of this prison is to swallow it. And I was like, I've never swallowed anything in my life, man. I'm not a drug trafficker. You guys have all the experience, right? Like, so please, like, teach me how to swallow it. And they were like, okay. we'll teach you how to swallow it, but in return, you got to write down like my contact details and get in contact with my sister because I don't have any money and like the Tanzanian embassy doesn't care about us. And I was like, bro, if you can help me get this thing out of here, like I will put money on your card. Like this thing is so important to me. It's been my life for the last 5 years. Like it's documented every single step of the way. I've documented my feelings, my thoughts, my relationship with my father, all of these things. This thing is like, it's my life force. And they said, sure. What we do is we got to make decoy. We got to make like a dummy version of this. So they wrapped this thing up and they were like, this is about 10 grams. This is easy. We swallow this stuff all the time. And I was like, okay, I don't know how we're going to do it. But they were like, we will sneak out little pieces of sticky tape and we'll keep them in between our clothes from the factory. And then we will wrap this thing in tissue. And then on Sunday, we will, and these guys risk their life. Like these guys risk adding 10, 15 years to their sentence. Taking the nail clippers out of the barbershop, you're going to get like, that's going to cost you 5 years of your life. So they took the nail clipper out to clip the edges of the capsule to make it so that you could swallow it. And once they were certain, they were like, this is, and this took 4 months just to get the sticky tape, just to get everything going. Like it was like Shawshank Redemption. And they were like, swallow it. And I was like, no problem. This is going to be easy. I'm going to sit on my bed at night. I'll pull the blanket over my head and I'll just swallow it. Man, I tell you, I take my hat off to anybody that's ever trafficked drugs in their stomach. This thing was, not only can you not swallow it, but everything in your head is telling you like, you're about to die. Like if you choke on this, like it's going against your instincts as a human. It's like that thing's not supposed to be in your mouth. Like you can't get it. And at that stage, the contact details of everybody had swollen up to like 60, 70 people. People from all around the prison were like, yo, I heard Matthew's going to sneak out the journal. You got to get him your number. So I had all of these numbers coming in from all around the prison of people saying, you got to contact my sister. She lives in the US. You got to do this. You got to contact this embassy. You got to do this. People don't know I'm here. I've been here for 11 years. You got to help me. And I was like, okay. Bro, it was heavy. And I couldn't swallow it. It got to the stage where I was on camera like, buh, buh. And the officers were like, what's wrong with you? What are you doing? Why do you keep making this face in the camera? Like the prison bureau is asking, what's wrong with you? And I was like, nothing's wrong with me, you know? And the police were searching all of my stuff. And because if they even find the sticky tape, I'm in so much trouble. And I was like, okay, and I went back to the guys. I was like, I can't swallow it. And the one guy that like literally protected me from all of those people that wanted to rip the skin from my face was Peter, my brother from Papua New Guinea. And he's like, bro, when you first started writing this thing, you must have had a plan on how you were going to get it out of here, right? And I was like, yeah, but I'm not going to tell anybody. And he's like, okay, but you can tell me, right? I was like, I'm going to put it in my North Face jacket. And he's like, where's your North Face jacket? And I'm like, it's with my stuff. And he's like, okay, but, that's going to be a problem, but because you're going home in October. He's like, they probably won't even give you your North Face jacket. They'll probably just give you your regular clothes and they'll keep your jacket. So I've kept this thing. I went to solitary. I came back. This thing's swollen up. I got so many contact details here. And the day that they gave me my clothes to wash, I was so nervous. And Peter was like, his jacket. And they were like, his jacket? The big black jacket. And they were like, oh yeah, no problem. Go wash it. So I was like, that's him. So it's like, okay, that's the first miracle. They've given me my black jacket. And I've got 2 police escort. They've taken me into the washroom. There's 2 cameras in the washroom. I'm sitting there on a little stool and Peter's over at the sink and he's got a big basin full of water and I got a big basin full of water. And in my top pocket, I've rolled up all of the journal entries and I put it in tissue. My hand is like, have you ever, when you're so nervous, you try to spit? I couldn't spit for my life. I just had froth coming up. My lips were like curled up. I looked like somebody that just been doing lines of like meth or something. And the officer's like, Nikamana. I'm like, oh, measure. Like, he's like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, I'm fine. So I'm slowly, and Peter's there singing and washing and singing and washing, trying to like distract the officers. And the officers asking him like, why are you so happy? Matthew's the one that's going home. You still have 20 years on your sentence. And at that moment, I just took it out of my top pocket and smushed it into my North Face jacket and kept pretending to wash the North Face jacket. And you got to understand, right? Forget about the contact details. All the information I had written in about, which officer did this to which prisoner, which company, like I was looking at 15 years if that thing got caught by the police. So the day after, the same officer came up to me, and he was a real prick, man. He was a real mean guy. And he represents like the young new generation of communists, and they're even more communist than their parents. It's weird. Xi Jinping's worked on their brains so well. And he came up to me really angry. He got in my face and he's like, "你结束了吗?" I was like, "What?" He's like, "你结束了吗? You finished?" I'm like, 结束了什么? He's like, 你结束了洗衣服吗? And I was like, oh, he's like, "Did you finish washing your clothes?" I'm like, yeah, why? And he's like, "Are you sure you're finished? Think about it. Think about it." And I was frozen, man. I was like, I had to explain to my wife 9 months. Now I'm going to have to explain to her 15 years. I was like, and he goes, "Okay, like, Gendama, like, Nije Shula." He's like, "Really, you're finished?" I was like, "I'm finished, bro. I'm finished." Like this, with my hands in the air. And then the day I was leaving the prison, I'm supposed to leave at 6 a.m. The police came to my room at like 4 a.m. and fucking trashed everything of mine, tearing it into like confetti, my blanket, my everything. And I was like, somebody had tipped them off that I had planned on getting this thing out of the prison, because they went through everything, and I was handcuffed, right? They handcuffed me and they were like rubbing my face, like, "Why are you laughing? Why are you so happy?" And I was just laughing because I was like, you guys have it. The thing that you're looking for, you took it out of my room and it's back with you guys in the police quarters where you guys are, under lock and key. Like, you're literally keeping that journal safe for me while you're here looking for it. So the comedy of that moment was just too much for me. I just started laughing. And plus, I'm going home in 2 hours, right? So I was like, these guys can lick my bag for whatever I care.
Weren't you worried they were going to search the jacket at some point?
Bro, it wasn't until I cleared the prison, cleared immigration, got on the plane, and the plane was like an hour into my flight into Malaysia. I literally like slowly crept my hand inside and then pulled out the journal, and I just started crying, Sean. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's one of the most emotional moments in my life. I was like, because more so than myself, right? More so than the art, or more so than the having that, I can give this to my grandkids, and my grandkids can read what was my grandfather was feeling like in solitary confinement in a Chinese prison. But more so than that, like, I had the hopes and dreams of like 60, 70 of my brothers that I left behind. And I had all of that weight on my shoulders, that I had so much work to do when I got home, to contact these people, to put fire on their embassy, to call the Tanzanian embassy and be like, "You guys are disgraceful." Follow up with the PNG government. I had so many things on my plate that I just was just like, I quit. It was overwhelmed. I just started crying on the flight.
So just go back to the cell. You were laughing in the cell.
Yeah.
And then when they wrapped that up, how did that feel?
I mean, the whole thing was comical to me because, I mean, yourself when you're in prison, right? Everybody's a snitch, right? Especially it's not like the US or Australia where you got pretty good conditions and you can buy a Sony PlayStation. You can do, like, a Chinese prison. There's nothing, man. If you don't have money, you don't have soap. And if you don't have money for 15 years, then that means you haven't had soap for 15 years. And when you put people in that condition and you put people who are desperate, they will snitch on you for the smallest, most minuscule difference in their life. Like, they'll snitch on their brother from the same village in Nigeria, from the same family. They will snitch on him for a banana or for a yogurt or for a pen refill, right? So the fact that everybody had come and said to me, like, good, congratulations, bro, you beat these because they gave you a second sentence and you still crushed it. We love you. And then one of those people was the ones that told the police that I had a journal. So that was quite funny to me, right? Because I was like, you couldn't make this shit up, right? And I kind of had fooled myself that I was like such a good guy amongst the prison that nobody would snitch on me. And that's why I was like, haha, like, you idiot. But then also the fact of, like, 3 days before I wash the jacket, I give it to you. You take it over to the police section. It's locked. And now you came looking for it, but you're the ones that have it. It was like poetic justice for me. So I just started laughing.
How heavy was it? Would they not have noticed the weight when they were putting the jacket back?
I mean, it's like that, right?
Yeah.
Because it's these coronavirus masks, right? And you got like 4 A4 pieces of paper on one mask like that. So they wouldn't have noticed at all. They would have had to actually go through. But the thing that they do when you leave Chinese prison is they go through everything. They search everything. They take your shoelaces apart. They go through everything. So for whatever reason, that thing was protected by God, man. It's the only, I can only think of that thing was protected by a higher power. And the fact that the Chinese police, they now know, because the Toronto Globe article with James Matthews. So I know that they know, because the guys, when I left, I was in communication with their families, and some of their families told me that, like, the prison is very angry that you were on BBC. The prison is very angry that you smuggled out the journal. The prison is very angry. So I'm not allowed to contact any of the prisoners directly. I'm not allowed to write letters to them. I'm not allowed to do anything. But I was assured by Peter when I got home, he's like, your name rings out in this prison, man, because we've had so many people that came before you that promised the world. They were going to make feature films. They were going to do this. They were going to go to the United Nations. They were going to, and not one of those people did all for us. But you risked your life to take out this shit, and you did it, you know. So I know that whilst they got a lot of punishment on my behalf, it was worth it, man.
Wow. All right. Explain your release then.
Crazy. So you have to understand, right? The Chinese people that run the Australian embassy, from the day I got arrested to the day I got released, we were at war. For whatever reason, they didn't like me, and I was not looking for any special treatment, but I was so fed up with the fact that the Chinese-born Australians, right, were treating the embassy staff like like a concierge service. And the embassy had told my father, don't contact us. If you want to speak to us, you have to speak to Canberra. You can't speak to us directly. We don't work for you, blah, blah, blah. So our relationship was so bad. And, you know, there's Australian citizens who are Chinese from Beijing, in Beijing prison, that don't speak English. Not saying their English is bad. They don't even speak English. And the embassy's fawning over them, making sure everything is okay for them. And then I'm there, and I'm like, look at my fingernails, and they're just like brushing me off, you know. The Australian citizens who were of Chinese origin, the Chinese Australian, they would call the embassy, and the embassy would connect them to their families on like party line. And then when I asked them to do it, they were like, who told you we do that? We don't do that. So we were at war. And it got to the stage where towards the end, they were telling my father, like, you're not allowed to fly direct. You're not allowed to fly through Malaysia. You're not allowed to fly through Hong Kong. He can only fly direct. And if there's not a direct flight, then he'll have to go to the detention center and wait, because the Australian government doesn't have a treaty with China. And so I knew in my heart, I was like, Dad, at the best of times, like me and my dad, we don't get along, but we love each other deeply. And he did a lot for me during my incarceration. So we had mended a lot of our bridges, but my father is a civil servant, right? He's worked in the Australian government for 40 something years before he retired. So he was trusting the embassy, because he's like, I can only trust what the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade tells me. Like, I can't trust you because, you know, you're a criminal. So, but I was telling him, Dad, I'm in here with the prison bureau chief, and the head of the prison are telling me, doesn't matter which flight you take, just get the fuck out of China. We're tired of you. You know, tell your family that you want to fly Timbuktu, you want to fly Kathmandu. It doesn't matter. Just you get out of here. But you can't leave the prison before 6 a.m. on the last day of your sentence. But the embassy was telling my dad, no, the prison bureau has assured us you're not allowed to fly to Malaysia. You're not allowed to fly to Hong Kong. You have to book a direct flight. And because COVID had just ended, there was no direct flights. There was no direct flights to Perth from Beijing. So my dad would have to fly me to Melbourne, all of these things. And then when I finally got home, I finally convinced my father to book the ticket. And my father had a stroke 2 days before I got home. Yeah, his third stroke now since 2020. And I personally hold the Australian embassy responsible for my father's health, because not only did they not tell my dad that I wasn't coming home, like 2 weeks before I was supposed to come home, but they then like made the process of me coming home so complicated. And they, you know, my dad's just trying to help me to get out of Chinese prison, right? He's doing his best to try and help me amongst his own health issues. He's really just trying to be like, okay, I forgive you for whatever's happened between you and me, let's just get home and we'll deal with it. And like they made that process so hard for him that like not only was he dealing with all the emotion of like he's gonna see me again, my son's coming home, he had to deal with the emotion of like he might let me down. And I think that was too much for him, man. And I think that the embassy really has something to say for that, because yeah, there was no reason to make that process so hard, and especially hard for my father. Like, I don't care what you do to me. The embassy's put me through hell for 42,000 hours, and I can take it. I can take the weight of the Chinese prison system. I can take the pain and suffering that I caused my fiance. I can take all of that, but like, you have no right to do that to my family, man. You have no right to do that to my father. And for whatever reason, they decided that he was fair game and that they would they would take it out on him. So sadly, like me getting out of prison, it wasn't what it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be a moment of joy, and it was a moment of joy, obviously, but it almost killed my father. And for that, like I can never forgive anybody at the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, because it was deliberate. I know it was deliberate.
Yeah, that's terrible, man. The family members that suffer.
Yeah.
What about when you were on the flight? What was going through your mind?
I was so embarrassed because I had an iPhone 5. And I was trying to ask the guy, like, hey, man, it was like a burner from before I got arrested. I was like, can you guys charge this? And it's like, now we're on like iPhone 15 or something. And the guy was like, okay. And he went back to charge. And then at the end of my flight, his name's Kieran. He's a really nice guy, Malaysian Airlines cabin crew. And he came to me and said, the team are wondering why you got an iPhone 5 that's been switched off for so long that it won't charge. And I was like, I was in prison, man, for 5 years. And he was like, whoa, like his mind was blown. He's like, but you're so normal. You're such a nice guy. I was like, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. But I mean, finally getting to come home to my fiance, now that was phenomenal, I mean, that was like, thinking that we'd lost each other, not being able to communicate. The fact that the embassy was telling me, like, she's not your direct family member, therefore you're not allowed to talk to her. So I could only communicate through letters. The fact that for 2 years, I was unable to communicate with her. And it wasn't until somebody contacted my father and was like, oh, hey, your son's not been on Facebook for like 3 years. Where's your son? And my dad was like, oh, he's fine. And then my dad told me, someone's looking for you. I didn't want to tell them you're in prison. And I was like, yeah, no, well played, but tell them I'm not okay. I'm in prison. So they contacted me and they said, look, your brother, whose wedding I just went to in Bangkok in August, he's had a baby, and he just wants you to know that he knows where you are and that they've been looking for you, but that everyone's fighting for you. And I was like, that's amazing. Can you find my fiance? So I gave my brother the details, and then he reached out to her. And so the letter that I wrote her on Christmas Day, 2021, she received it, and she wrote back to me in 2022. And that was one of the most amazing moments of my life. And then, we were just working slowly towards the fact that I would eventually come home and that we would settle here and raise some kids on the farm and just enjoy the finer things in life, the simple things in life. So, as much as I was so angry with the embassy and I was so worried about my dad, but I was, I'd worked so hard to remain relevant in my fiance's life. And then for me to come home and get baptized and then get engaged and then get married, it's like a fairy tale. I still pinch myself, man. And it's like, it's surreal. It's not even real. Even now, I mean, I've been out for just under a year, and we still just pinch ourselves every day that, like, not only did you make it, you're in control of your faculty. Like, I'm not crazy up to a point. And then, on top of that, my father didn't pass away. He saw my sentence and he came to my wedding, and he was my best man at my wedding. And he even signed my marriage certificate in the registry. So yeah, we were so blessed. The coming home, whilst it was war, there was a lot of peace in the end as well.
Wow, what a story, Matthew, and so inspirational, especially at the end there. When you look back at the phone shop that set all this in motion, how do you feel about the phone shop?
I've had 42,000 hours to think about what happened on that day, and to think about, I've always been somebody that gives good advice to people, and I've always been somebody that's counseled, like, just, it's not worth it, man. Like, it's better to just pay the money and just leave it because this and that. And for whatever reason, like, on that day, I think I just had enough, man. I just had China fatigue. I was just like, you know what? Like, no, man, like, it's like, I just really had a bad China moment, as one of the American guys in the detention center said. He's just like, yeah, you just had a bad China moment. I'm like, yeah, I got tired of just getting around. Like, it took me so long to register my own company in China because you got to do this agent, you got to do this, you got to do this. It's like, this is like a 4-hour process that you guys have made 9 months, right? Like, Chinese life just grates at you. And I was tired. And if I had my time over again, yeah, sure, it's so easy. I just would have paid the 3,500 and left. But who knows? I would have got trapped in Cambodia, because I was flying to Cambodia in the first week of January. And I would have got trapped in Cambodia for coronavirus. Who knows? Maybe I would have died. Maybe I would have been trapped in coronavirus in Cambodia. My father would have had a stroke in Australia. Who knows? I don't regret it, is what I'm trying to say. It's like everything that happened from January 2020 that led me to where I am right now in my living room talking to you, married to the woman of my dreams, and to have this relationship with my father, and to have such a purpose in life, to work for people like Peter Moomin and people that can't defend themselves, to defend the defenseless. I wouldn't change it for the world. But I think what happened in that situation was just opportunism. There's no other word for it. He knew my language skills weren't good enough. He wanted the phone, and he was like, got nothing to lose. Worst thing that happens is I get the 1,500. Best thing that happens is we finesse this asshole out of his iPhone. I don't think it was much more than that. A lot of people have said, no, because of Scott Morrison's policies, you're Australian, they deliberately targeted you. And then I'm like, I don't like, once you start wearing tinfoil hats and going down those rabbit holes, like you'll never stop. So I think it was just opportunism. I think it was unlucky. And I think the fact that the security guards had non-lethal weapons, which is illegal in China. Even the major crimes officers were like, what the fuck do they have pepper spray for in the market? They're scratching their head. So I think the police had egg on their face, and they had to crush me. They had to make it look like those weapons were mine. And I noticed a lot of people in the YouTube comments, like, I've done some media, and a lot of people are like, this story doesn't add up. Why would they give you so much time? And why would you do this? And why would you do that? And it's like, the weapons were not mine. I defended myself against the 2 security guards, and then they said that those weapons were mine, right? So they've pinned those weapons on me as if I've woken up in the morning and gone to the phone store with a pepper spray, and it's just not what happened.
There's a lot of people out there who think justice is justice and there's no corruption, and you'll never convince those people unless they've been through the system. That's the only thing that can wake them up. But Matthew, do you credit all this with strengthening you? I mean, you're a very dynamic speaker. You're hilarious.
Thank you,
times,
Shaun.
talking about this stuff. But you just got a really good aura about you, man.
Thanks, man. You know what? I guess, like, at times it was such a dark comedy, like I had to see the comedic value in it. Otherwise it would have just driven me crazy. And I've always had a good sense of humor. I've always been good with people, and I've always just been able to, like, get along with everybody and be successful in whatever I've put my hand to. So when I was in these times, I was like, whatever, man. I got my fiance waiting for me. I got a new life outside. But sure, I mean, along the way, I was like, this stuff, if you could see the, simple things like in Chinese prison, you're not allowed to shower with your clothes off. You have to wear your clothes. And you're standing you're at a trough with a basin, and you're not allowed to throw water on your head with the basin. You have to use a towel and throw the water on your body. And there's an officer standing behind you telling you not to take your clothes off. And there's 2 cameras looking at you. And then once you're finished soaping up your body and soaping under your shirt, and you're covered in soap, and there's Nigerian guys next to you singing in Nigerian, and everyone's having a jolly old time. Then when you finish your shower, you put your water on yourself and you go, and then you take your clothes off, and the officer's screaming at you to tell you that you're not allowed to take your clothes off. You got to put your dry clothes on. And you're like, how can I put dry clothes on top of the wet clothes? Are you crazy? And the officer's like, I'm not saying that this is normal, but I'm just saying this is what I was told to tell you. So you're like, I can't even be angry at you people because this is just so bananas. Like, it's so outrageous that, like, how could anybody be upset that, like, we showered with our clothes on? So all of my brothers that I'm still in contact with, it's like, we know things that we just can't even, like, somebody needs to make that an animated short, like showering with your clothes on in Chinese prison. Because it's so bananas, like the logic of these people. And they're like, you're not allowed to show your ass to the prison bureau. The prison bureau doesn't want to see your ass. I'm like, if you don't want to see my ass, then let me go home. Like, and so at those times, it was just such a dark comedy. And I think that's what got us through, man. Really, I think that's what got me through. As far as trying to inspire, I'm not trying to inspire anybody. This is what happened. I'm trying to make the most out of it, man.
So in conclusion, Matthew, to the viewers who've been watching this for over 2 hours now, what do you say to them? Like, for young people who want to go backpacking around China and stuff, and where can people follow you on socials? And you got a book coming out as well.
Yeah, so look, this is something that's really important to people. And I went to war with the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade on this. There's no bail in China. Like, that in itself is crazy. There's no bail in China. Like, you need to really think about what that means. Like, if you get into an altercation with somebody walks out of a pizza store, says, punches you in the face, you both get arrested, right? And you get taken to a detention center, and you will stay in that detention center. Best case scenario, 37 days until the police come to make a formal arrest, and they say, oh, actually, you didn't do anything, so we'll release you, and you don't get charged with a crime, right? That's your best case scenario. So that means in 37 days, right? That means if you're living and working in China, you've lost your job, right? You failed your class if you're a student. Your landlord's already thrown away all your clothes because you're behind on rent, right? Your girlfriend's probably left you because you haven't answered the phone. Your mom's having kittens because you haven't answered the phone for 37 days. Like, there's no reason for you to go to China for anything. There's not enough money in the world. Believe me, I made a gang of money in China. There's no need for you to be there because there's no legal system. It's not a legal system. They arrest you, they isolate you from your family, they torture you into confession, and then they hold that confession up and they say, we can do whatever we want to this person because they came here and they confessed to the crime. And their justice system allows them to do that. And all your embassy's gonna do, all your lawyer's gonna do, is they're gonna fill your head full of promises and bullshit. And before you know it, you lost 6 or 7 or 8 years of your life, Do not go to China for anything. There's no amount of money that you can go to China for. If you get caught drink driving in China, that's 5 months in the detention center. 5 months of you not working. 5 months of your business being outside. 5 months. What if you're an importer? That means you got shipping containers on the dock, right? And you haven't cleared them. That means you're paying 8,000 renminbi a day for fees because you haven't cleared your stock from the harbor. Like, there's no need for you to go to China for anything because you're never right if you're a foreigner. You never get your day in court. There's no lawyer that can help you. And you will go to the detention center and you will stay there for a minimum 37 days. And you might contract tuberculosis, HIV, or hepatitis C as well. It's not worth it at all, ever. And for anybody that wants
to on socials,
I'm not on social media. If anybody wants to contact me, they can contact Shaun Attwood and he can forward it, only for like serious emails and stuff like that. We're in the process of talking to somebody that we like for exhibiting the journal, but that's going to be a lengthy process. And then I'm in the very delayed process of writing a book and hopefully publishing that at some stage. But probably more like writing a screenplay about the 194 days that we spent in solitary confinement.
Wow. Viewers, I hope you've enjoyed this one as much as me. Honestly, I've been on the edge of my seat. We've gone some dark places, some funny places, tragicomical, but bloody hell, your delivery really added to it, Matthew. We thank you. And please let us know in the comments what you thought and look forward to Matthew getting his book out. So take care. Cheers, everyone. Thank you, Matthew. Cheers.
Thank you so much.
If you are looking for a harrowing, hard-hitting Christmas read as a gift for somebody, my latest book, I've written 17. This is part of a 3-book series. Latest one, third in the installment, Sit-Downs with Serial Killers and Murderers. Link in the description box below this video. From the back, Having gained a rep for earning the trust of some of the world's most dangerous people, Shaun delves into his most hard-hitting interviews with the most menacing and violent murderers he's ever met. From serial killers to brutal prison gangs, Shaun has collected his most fascinating and incredible conversations with shocking criminal figures. He explores the life of an armed robber, a man who spent 45 years behind bars, and a serial killer with 52 confirmed victims. That's Delmas Colvin. I had to listen to that podcast again the next day. It disturbed my sleep. It's the most chilling one I've ever done, I would say, was interviewing Delmas in prison where he's serving life. If you're interested in these books, we appreciate your support. Links will be in the description box below this video if you're watching on YouTube. Cheers.